Chapter 1478. Working together, chanting songs, the atmosphere on the lawn was very lively. However, it was a pity that the advantage that Kiki and the other children had worked so hard to accumulate was not enough to turn the tables in the face of a strong opponent. The effect of the same method on the children in the father's team was far inferior to that of the white children. After all, they were not on the same level. The thinnest child was taller than Kiki, and the strongest or fattest child had arms thicker than Xianxian's thigh. On Chichi's side, Chichi could be considered a general with considerable combat strength, and Kangkang could barely be considered one as well. As for the rest, Da Jun was too weak, just like his father. He wanted to help his friends, but he was powerless. Xianxian was not bad, but he was too young. He could only be considered half a fighter with potential. As for Nuo Yi, this child was here to act cute. So, when Kiki and the others were forced to the edge of the bench, the village chief finally called the end of the competition. Poplar Fruit also loudly repeated in English. The white children cheered and jumped off the bench. Kangkang also regretfully let go of Xianxian. Kiki only recovered from the intense competition after hearing her father's words. When the village chief called the end of the competition, the little girl did not even notice. However, the remaining children were having fun. They were still yelling and using all their strength. Especially Xianxian. Little chubby Xian had an unyielding spirit. The video of him getting up after falling down countless times on the grasslands was not staged. Xianxian clenched his little fist, his big face almost squeezed together. He yelled and tried to push to the left. Nuo Yi, who was close to Kiki, felt that Kiki was not using any strength. He stopped in confusion, but Da Jun and Xianxian did not. Xianxian used the most strength, forcing Da Jun and Nuo Yi to squeal as if they were about to fall. Kiki was also squeezed, but the little girl raised her head and looked at the photographer in front of her. She was beaming with joy, as if she thought it was fun. The game only ended when the dads managed to pacify Xianxian, who had gone berserk. There was nothing much to say about the winning side. Naturally, it was the farm kids who had the upper hand. Kiki and Kangkang were a little disappointed, but they didn't care too much about it. If I get it, I'll be lucky. If I don't, it's my fate. Of course, the children couldn't be so calm. However, after experiencing the torment of "Where's your dad?" countless times, the children's immunity had greatly increased. Next, the village chief asked people to move over 10 wooden stakes and place them in a circle. There was no need to guess what kind of competition this was. It really was chair snatching. Poplar Fruit and Hu Jun looked at each other and couldn't help but smile bitterly. They really didn't agree on this beforehand. However, if it weren't for the fact that they were filming the show themselves, they would have suspected that the guests were colluding with the production team. Obviously, the production team's creativity wasn't that simple. While the village chief was laughing weirdly, boxes of high heels were brought over. Next, it's our dad's chair snatching competition. The rules of the game are that every contestant has to wear high heels and walk around the big circle while listening to the music. The village chief introduced the rules. We have to wear high heels. A group of men wearing high heels? Poplar Fruit looked constipated as he reluctantly translated the rules. The white brothers on the farm were laughing so hard that they couldn't take it anymore. Each of them chose a pair of high heels that fit their feet. Poplar Fruit found that there were really high heels that fit his big feet. He really didn't know if the production team had ordered some men to make high heels that were suitable for men, or if they had sold out all the large high heels that couldn't be sold out. Poplar Fruit felt that it was very likely the latter. After putting on the high heels, not to mention the others, even Poplar Fruit himself was a little unsteady. It took a while for him to get used to it. Fortunately, it wasn't high. The height of the heel was only about 5 centimeters. Papa, I'm worried. I'm worried that it will break. The little girl was very sensible. She held her father's hand and took care of him like she was taking care of an old man. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "It should be okay. Papa will be careful." Her father walked steadily. Kiki was still a little scared and said, "I think high heels are too scary. It must be very uncomfortable to walk." Hu Jun walked over and said with a smile, "Don't feel scared. You will wear them every day in the future. Why? I don't like high heels. Kiki pouted and said unhappily. Why? Was there a reason? Which woman didn't wear high heels? Even Fong Beibei, who was usually the most simple and didn't dress up, had 2 pairs of high heels in her shoe cabinet. Zhu Shimin staggered over and said with a smile, I think Kiki may not need to wear high heels in the future. She will grow tall in the future. Why would she need to wear high heels? Chichi immediately became happy. She giggled and said, that's right, I'll be able to grow taller in the future. I will be taller than Papa. No, don't be taller than Papa. Poplar Fruit quickly waved his hand and said with a smile, Papa will be satisfied if you are 1.7 or 1.75 meters tall. In the domestic environment, it was difficult for tall girls to marry. If Kiki grew to 1.9 meters, wouldn't her boyfriend be at least 2 meters tall? Perhaps, only Yaro Ming's height was worthy of such a tall girl. However, Kiki would definitely grow tall in the future. Poplar Fruit himself was 1.88 meters tall, and Kiki's biological mother was not short either. Although Poplar Fruit didn't have much contact with her, he estimated that Wu Yu was at least 1.7 meters tall. With such an excellent gene combination, coupled with adequate nutrition since childhood, Kiki would definitely be more than 1.75 meters tall. Ho, as long as the little girl didn't eat until she was fat, she would have a model-level figure when she grew up. However, Kiki didn't have any concept of this now. She blinked her big eyes in confusion, looked at her father, and asked, Papa, if I am so tall, do I still need to wear high heels? Haha, wearing high heels or not has nothing to do with being tall. Poplar Fruit patted his daughter's little head and said with a smile, if you like it, wear it. If you don't like it, don't wear it. No one will force you. The little girl was happy. She immediately waved her hand and said, No, I don't like to wear it. Silly girl, when you grow up, you probably won't say that anymore. No matter how tall you are, which girl will be able to resist the temptation of high heels? In the world, there is no girl who will complain that her legs are too long, right? There is no such thing as the longest, only longer. You will know in the future. Chapter 1479. The competition began. The music started. It was melodious and rhythmic. That's right, it was the world-shaking, popular square dance song, the hottest ethnic trend. Hearing the tune, Poplar Fruit stumbled in his high heels and almost fell. Instead, Nui liked the song very much. He stood on the wooden stake next to him and danced with his hands and feet. He even danced with rich emotions. This caused a few of his little friends to follow suit and dance in a frenzy. Kiki, on the other hand, followed her father's footsteps excitedly. She giggled and imitated her father's twisted steps. As she walked, she wanted to take advantage of the chaos to squeeze into her father's line. Kiki. Poplar Fruit could only turn his head and pat the little girl's shoulder. He smiled and said, It's not your turn yet. Don't come in. Daddy can't take care of you. All right then. Kiki then returned to her little friend's side. She also jumped and danced, but she did not go crazy like Nui and the others. The little girl was still very concerned about her father's competition. The dads walked in circles. The feeling of walking in high heels was very strange. It was as if they were forced to walk on their toes. The big strides that could have been very manly became awkward. Of course, this feeling of discomfort was the same for both the guest dads and the white dads. However, while the white dads were paying attention to their feet, the guest dads were focused on acting cute. Especially Lin Yongjian. His dance was like a little swan. He wished he could lift one of his feet above his head. Suddenly, the music stopped, and the team, which was originally very happy, suddenly returned to reality. Everyone hurriedly wriggled their butts to fight for a wooden stake chair. Poplar Fruit's eyes and feet were quick. His body flashed and rushed in front of a white guy to occupy a wooden stake. The latter could not say that Poplar Fruit stole his position because he was still a meter away from the wooden stake. Everyone sat down. The white guy who fought with Poplar Fruit for a wooden stake stood there stupidly. Lin Yongjian also did not get his own wooden stake in the father's team. Lin Yongjian had been dancing so happily just now that everyone had forgotten about his nickname, Black Hole. His reaction speed and even his luck were too bad. "I'm out." He stood blankly in the middle for a while, then waved his hand in a carefree manner with a smile and left the competition circle. "Papa is the best." Outside, Kiki was overjoyed. She ran to her father on the other side and threw herself into the arms of Poplar Fruit, who was still sitting on the wooden stake. Hee hee. Poplar Fruit also smiled proudly. He didn't care about anything else, but his daughter's praise was the best reward for him. There wasn't too much time for regret or happiness. A new round of the competition had begun. This time, there were only 5 wooden stakes left. This time, the song was Jiangnan style that the whole world was familiar with. The explosive sound came from a small speaker at the side, and the scene was instantly ignited. Under the influence of Jiangnan style, whether it was the guest fathers or the white dads, they all stepped on their high heels excitedly and danced passionately on horseback. The scene of them wearing high heels and dancing on horseback was too beautiful. Even the little guys beside them were laughing so hard that they couldn't stand straight. Kiki had to hold onto a wooden stake to stand firm. However, while everyone was happy, there were 2 people who seemed to be isolated from the world and were not affected at all. Nuo Yi hugged Kangkang's shoulders from behind and hung himself on Kangkang's big brother. He even shouted, "Wifey, wifey." Kangkang could not stand the disturbance and escaped in a panic. This episode reminded the audience of Kangkang and Da Jun from the previous episode. It seemed that Kangkang was still very loyal. After confirming that Da Jun was his wife, he no longer accepted Nuo Yi's pursuit. This time, the music seemed to last a lot longer. After gradually numbing everyone's nerves, it suddenly stopped. Poplar Fruit reacted the fastest and immediately grabbed a wooden stake. Then, the other dads also grabbed their spot. Zhu Shimin was very quick-witted. At first, he could not grab a wooden stake from the white dads, but when he turned around, he saw an empty wooden stake waving at him. When Zhu Shimin grabbed it, the 2 white dads who were huddled together on another wooden stake sighed. Why were they fighting among themselves? There was clearly an empty stake in front of them. If they had taken it first, Zhu Shimin would not have been able to grab it. However, among the people who were still standing, other than the 2 white dads, there was still Hu Jun. He pretended to look left and right, then waved his hand and shouted, "Aya, I lost." As he said this, he was about to walk out. Liu Yi, who was most familiar with Hu Jun, felt that something was amiss. He raised his hand and pointed at Hu Jun with a smile. "Ah, senior bro, you lost on purpose, right?" Everyone looked at Hu Jun and happened to see the corner of his mouth under his simple and honest face. They immediately understood what was going on. Definitely. Poplar Fruit also joined in the commotion. Hu Jun laughed and didn't explain. He winked and slipped out of the room. They did not expect such a burly man to be so cunning. He clearly lost on purpose to get rid of the pain of wearing high heels. It was nothing much. After everyone made fun of Hu Jun for a while, the competition continued. Following that, there were only 3 wooden stakes left. The men in high heels circling them were also left with only 5 people. Zhu Shimin cleverly gestured, "If the 3 of us grab it, we'll win." It was a pretty good idea, but they had to do it. Although Poplar Fruit and company had the advantage in numbers, their opponents still had 2 people. This time, no one paid attention to the name and rhythm of the music. The 5 of them walked around, each with a heavy heart. They paid attention to the wooden stakes next to them and the followers who could very well become their opponents. The program team suddenly paused the music. It was shorter than the previous 2 times. Poplar Fruit quickly grabbed a wooden stake as usual. However, this time, Poplar Fruit was careful. Not only did he not grab the wooden stake closest to him, he left it to Zhu Shimin, who was also very close to him. He moved his long legs and took a step to the wooden stake closest to the white dad and immediately sat down. Poplar Fruit's sudden appearance made the white dads panic for a moment. By the time they came back to their senses and went to look for the next wooden stake, Liu Yi had also managed to grab one with his cunning. Needless to say, Zhu Shimin easily accepted the fruit that Poplar Fruit left for him. Where was the applause? Where was the applause? Everyone had yet to come back to their senses. The dad's team had actually achieved a complete victory in the third round. After the village chief announced it, the little rascals happily pounced over. Chapter 1480. Poplar Fruit, Zhu Shimin, and Liu Yi. The three of them had relied on their tacit understanding and Poplar Fruit's explosiveness to win the competition. Looking at their mischievous smiles, it felt like they were celebrating. They had no choice. They also wanted to win to their heart's content. One had to know that the father's team had never been good at playing games. At every stop, they would be tortured badly by the villagers. When had they ever achieved a perfect victory like today? This was the first time. Of course, when the children came over, they quickly reined in their smugness and became serious. Next was the children's turn to compete. When the village chief was announcing the rules, Kiki suddenly asked worriedly, "Village chief, do we have to wear high heels too?" Hey! The village chief did not react for a moment. The young lady added, "But, I don't know how to wear high heels." Looking at her pitiful big eyes that were watery, even a heart of steel would melt, right? The village chief understood and laughed out loud. He waved his hand and said, "I don't have high heels that suit you." Suddenly, the fathers all laughed. Everyone understood that Kiki was still worried about high heels. As he did not understand, a curious Caucasian father grabbed Poplar Fruit and asked as if they were very close, "Leon, what did they say?" "My daughter doesn't like wearing high heels, so I hope that the children won't wear high heels." This time, Poplar Fruit did not translate word by word. Instead, he simply paraphrased, "Then, the host said that they don't have such small shoes." They instantly understood. The farm team also laughed. A young boy even mischievously jumped out and said, "Why? I want to wear high heels." My daughter beside him was even more interesting. She shouted, "Because you're not gay." Kiki heard it, but the young lady did not quite understand the joke. When everyone laughed again, she was still holding her father's hand in a daze. "It's fine. You don't need to understand it yet." Poplar Fruit smiled and patted his daughter's head. Compared to the secretive education of children in China, the exposure of foreign children was really fierce. The children's competition for the chairs began. The first song was very funny. It was actually a song about throwing green onions. This song was also a well-known international dance song. Even the white kids were waving their hands and twisting their arms with laughter. It looked like the Caucasian children were gradually getting used to the atmosphere of recording a show. They were even better at stealing the limelight than their fathers. Kiki was even more excited. She had learned the Spring Onion song on the dance floor at home. Although it was a comical dance choreographed by the netizens, Kiki's soft body was still very cute. In this segment, Kiki's performance definitely stole the limelight. She made her dads laugh so hard that they were convulsing with laughter. Her opponents also turned to look at her from time to time. However, dancing was just for fun. The ultimate goal of running in circles was to snatch the chair. But Kiki was dancing and having so much fun that she seemed to have forgotten about this. The music suddenly stopped and paused for half a second. Then, when everyone began to scramble for the chair, Kiki came back to her senses. If it was any other time, Kiki definitely would not have been able to snatch the chair because she was slower than the others by half a beat. But miraculously, at this time, luck was on the young lady's side. The two wooden poles in front and behind were being snatched by others, but the wooden pole next to Kiki was empty for almost a second. No one was snatching it from Kiki. When they turned back, Kiki had already sat down in a panic. The young lady patted her chest. She was still in shock and wanted to laugh but was embarrassed. Luckily, Poplar Fruit gave her a thumbs up. Only then did Kiki calm down. She put her hands on the wooden pole between her legs and pressed her gauzy fake dress under her hands. She smiled sweetly. She had the vivacious attitude of a tomboy and the quiet elegance of a young lady. But this was also the reason why most of the audience liked Kiki so much. In the second round, Kiki was much more focused. Although the rhythm of the music made people have the urge to dance, Kiki endured it. The young lady with the same quick reaction managed to snatch the chair for this round. Among the remaining children, there were only Kiki, Kangkang, and 3 other white children. If it wasn't for the clever editing of the show, the audience probably wouldn't have noticed this coincidence. Do you still remember? In the first episode, in Shishan, there was a game of snatching chairs. In the end, didn't Xian Xian, Kiki, and a few farmer dads fight to the end? It was as if there was a cycle of reincarnation. Unlike before, the current Nuo Yi wasn't as clingy to his father anymore. He could bravely face his own challenges. Xian Xian didn't cry like before, and Kang Kang didn't dislike participating in such a childish game. There was also Kiki's change. The young lady could calmly face challenges and failures. Before the third round began, the small speaker seemed to have run out of battery. The village chief conveyed the show's temporary decision. You guys will sing the next song yourselves. After listening to Poplar Fruit's retelling, the dads on the farm smiled and said to Poplar Fruit, "Hey, Leon, give us some English songs." Indeed, there were too many Chinese songs. Although they were all divine songs, they couldn't understand them, but it seemed like they had found the wrong person. Letting Poplar Fruit lead the song? He couldn't even sing well. That song. Kiki jumped out happily. She pulled her father's hand and shook it. If you're happy and you know it's, clap your hands. Poplar Fruit instantly understood. This was a song that Kiki learned from school and sang for him when she came back. The Chinese version was also very famous in China. If you feel happy, clap your hands. Poplar Fruit had heard this clap your hands happy song many times when he was young, but it was the first time that Poplar Fruit heard the English version of Poplar Fruit. So, Poplar Fruit excitedly went to look for information. He found out that the song wasn't Chinese at all. It wasn't even English. It came from a Spanish children's song, and if he continued to look into it, the song might have come from the former Soviet Union in the 1930s. Well, there was no need to go so far. Now, Kiki had given her father a very good choice. Poplar Fruit only needed to sing for the children to continue playing games. Poplar Fruit ran to the middle of the wooden pile, clapped his hands gently, and sang, "If you're happy and you know it's, clap your hand." At first, Poplar Fruit was a little shy, but soon, Poplar Fruit, who had been a teacher for so long, adjusted. He raised his hands high, clapped his hands, and continued to sing loudly. "If you're happy and you know it's, clap your hands." Chapter 1481. The song that Poplar Fruit sang was not very pleasant to the ears. Luckily, it was not out of tune, but because it was so common, it resonated with everyone. The children followed the rhythm of Poplar Fruit's hand clapping happily. A few of the Caucasian fathers even clapped and sang along with Poplar Fruit. Of course, Liu Yi and the rest did not show any weakness. They immediately remembered the Chinese lyrics and sang along happily. In this joyous atmosphere, the results of the competition did not seem to be important. Although the third round was over, Kiki, Kang Kang, and a little boy were still left behind. However, the village chief cleverly announced the end of the competition. He waved a bunch of lollipops and rushed forward. He happily shouted in the middle of the group of children, "I announce that the winners today are the children from our father's team and the children from our farm's team." Poplar Fruit also translated, "All the children will receive a lollipop as a reward." The last sentence raised the atmosphere to its peak. The children, whether it was Kiki and the Caucasian children, all jumped up in excitement. They cheered, screamed, and hugged. It looked like sweet and delicious candies, and beautiful lollipops were all children's favorite. This had nothing to do with the difference in skin color. The sports meet had ended, but the excitement did not stop. The fathers and children were even invited by the farm owner, Steve, to sit on the farm's trailer and take a look around his farm. Then, they returned to their small villa. Speaking of which, this episode was really easy. At least they were living in a modern mansion, and they did not have to work hard to fight for a house. Back at their residence, Poplar Fruit and the rest did not have to worry about how to boil water or tidy up the bed. They could directly take the little rascal, who had a head full of grass, to the bathroom for a bath. Even more blissful was that the 5 fathers did not have to worry about dinner tonight. After they bathed, changed, tidied up, and went downstairs, the program crew was already waiting for them. Poplar Fruit was dragged downstairs by Kiki. After taking a bath, the little fellow put on a satin dress. Originally, it was pajamas, but because it was a little cold, she put on a white coat. Then, with her long hair hanging loose, she went around barefoot. She even followed Moi and the others downstairs energetically. When she saw the scene outside, Kiki ran up excitedly and pulled Poplar Fruit, who was still buttoning his shirt, outside. "Papa, hurry up, hurry up." After taking a bath, Kiki's little face became even more delicate and cute. She smiled brightly and excitedly said, "There's a lot of delicious food. What's the hurry? No one is fighting with you for it." Poplar Fruit laughed, bent down, and fiercely hugged the little girl's waist, causing her to cry out in surprise. Then, she leaned on her father's shoulder and giggled. Her hair was scattered, some hanging on her face, some hanging on Poplar Fruit's back, and some naughtily drilling into Poplar Fruit's neck. That wet and slippery feeling was an indescribable joy. After going downstairs, Poplar Fruit put Kiki down. Of course, this was also strongly requested by Kiki herself. The little girl had grown up and rarely pestered her father to carry her. More often than not, she wanted to be able to run around by herself. It seemed that this kind of freedom was very good. However, Poplar Fruit was still a little disappointed. Occasionally, he would miss the time when the little girl was young. She was still a little girl and could not leave his arms every day. As long as Poplar Fruit put her down, she would cry loudly. Those days were gone forever. Of course, no matter how clingy a child was, there would be a time when they grew up. Poplar Fruit only felt that it was a pity that Kiki grew up too quickly. Perhaps, in the future, when he had a new little fellow with Fong Bebe, Poplar Fruit would once again be able to recall that kind of happiness of being needed all the time, right? Of course, Kiki was still sticking to her father. Although she did not want her father to carry her, when she went out, the little girl was reserved for a moment and did not run crazily anymore. Instead, she stood beside her father like a little lady and stuffed her little hand into her father's big hand. Today's dinner was super sumptuous. A long table was filled with all kinds of Western barbecue, seafood chowder, vegetable salad, fruit platter, and so on. There were also bouquets of decorative flowers and candlesticks. The faint and bright flames looked so charming under the night sky. However, the little fellows seemed to only pay attention to the delicious food. Poplar Fruit and Kiki greeted the village head, Hu Jun, and Kang Kang, who had already finished their meal and came over early. They pulled out chairs and sat down. The little girl leaned over to her father's ear and said, "Papa, look, isn't it super delicious?" "Oh, yes. Later, you can eat whatever you like. Just treat it as a buffet," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "I like to eat buffet." Kang Kang ran over and leaned on the table to chat with Poplar Fruit and Kiki. She said, "The last time we went to a buffet together, there was so many delicious food. You can order whatever you want. I've eaten before. Little fat lamb, big fat cow, and seafood buffet," the little girl said with great familiarity. Her memory was much better than Kang Kang's. The previous experience of Poplar Fruit taking her out for a meal was still vivid in her mind. "Aya, you're making me want to eat," Kang Kang said with a smile. Of course, they had to wait for everyone to come down before they started eating together. Soon, the other fathers and children gathered together, and their seats were changed several times. In the end, the children sat in groups of 2 or 3 while the fathers squeezed in. Before eating, the village head gave a small task to the fathers. While they were thinking, the lively dinner finally began. The little fellows were still there, and the atmosphere was lively. They were all shouting about what they wanted to eat, or jumping down themselves and running around with plates. It was as if everyone was really eating a Manchu Han imperial feast, with so many delicacies. In fact, the taste of these dishes was average. The barbecue was the taste of meat that had been roasted, the vegetables were the taste of vegetables and salad, and the seafood was the original taste. Compared to the various cooking methods and seasoning techniques in China, these dishes were really lacking. He didn't know what the other fathers were thinking. Poplar Fruit cooked by himself, so he was picky. After eating a few mouthfuls, he felt that he couldn't eat anymore, so he simply ate fruits. However, the little fellows seemed to like it very much. Kiki ate the barbecued meat in big mouthfuls, and even filled up a big bowl of vegetable salad. As for Nuo Yi, it was even worse. Hu Jun gave him a piece of barbecued chicken wing, and he kept mumbling about how good he was, making Liu Yi jealous. Village head, are you hungry? Why don't you have some too? While eating happily, Kiki did not forget her favorite village head. The kind little girl even used a fork to fork a big piece of meat and gave it to the village head. Oh, it's really delicious. Thank you, Kiki. The village head ate in big mouthfuls, and as he chewed, he gave a thumbs up. His eyes were shining with gratitude. Chapter 1482. It was time for a wave of sensationalism. Dear dads and darlings. Seeing that everyone was almost done eating, the village chief stood at the side of the long table and said with a smile, "This is the third season of Where Are We Going, and the last dinner in our entire trip." The village chief choked up a little. He seemed to have realized that the atmosphere had also affected him. He coughed twice and said, "Does everyone have a lot of thoughts now?" "Yes," Da Jun said loudly. This kid suddenly echoed, causing the village chief and his dad to be stunned. Lin Yongjian looked at his son with some doubt. Then Da Jun, tell us your thoughts. The village chief laughed. Aya, I finally don't have to listen to them speak English, Da Jun said to everyone's surprise. He was very engrossed in it. It's so ugly and fast that I'm about to faint. His voice was dragged out. It could be seen that he had been suppressing his depression for the past 2 days. Poplar Fruit and the others all laughed. The village chief also smiled helplessly. He originally wanted to sensationalize, but now he was led astray by Da Jun. I can help you. Kiki raised her fork and laughed happily. Poplar Fruit secretly pressed down the fork in the little girl's hand. It was impolite. Aya, forget it. I feel like I'm about to faint. Da Jun spread out his hands and then hung his head on the back of the chair. The dads all laughed. They laughed at Da Jun for being too young and insensible. He was actually annoyed with such a beautiful girl serving him. Kiki did not understand. She also giggled, but she was a little confused. Actually, the village chief wanted to express that there was a problem. He wanted to use the last dinner as a tear-jerking point. However, the dads understood, but the little ones did not listen at all. What was the last dinner? There was still breakfast tomorrow. Until they truly bid farewell to each other, they probably wouldn't know that every second that passed was a second less. Each of us will use a song to express our current feelings. The village chief laughed. He finally turned the topic back. This small segment was something that they had discussed with their fathers before. They had asked them to prepare their respective songs so that there wouldn't be an awkward silence. Come on, I'll sing first. Hu Jun said confidently. He stood up with a glass of wine in his hand and prepared to sing, Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you. Tilda in front of him, Da Jun, Xian, and Kang Kang were playing with a big cake in the middle of the table. Then, they suddenly started singing. Hu Jun opened his mouth, but in the end, it was snatched away. He said helplessly, forget it, I've seen people steal the show, but I've never seen people steal the singing. Starting over, Hu Jun stopped brewing this time. He raised his wine glass and sang, Where is happiness? Happiness is here. This song is quite old. Poplar Fruit opened his mouth. Although he could tell that Hu Jun's singing was not very good and was even off-key than him, and the lyrics were not accurate, he could still tell the origins of this song. Where is Happiness was a song that was older than Poplar Fruit. In the early 1980s, it was performed by the older generation of singers, Teacher Yin, at the Spring Festival Gala and became popular. However, Poplar Fruit had heard it from his parents' collection of cassettes, and at the scene, probably only people from Hu Jun's and Lin Yongjian's generation would be familiar with this song. Even Liu Yi and Zhu Shimin, who were born a few years before this song, might not even know this song. Hence, everyone was very confused. Then, when they heard Hu Jun tampered with the lyrics, wherever the father goes, the child will follow. They laughed and clapped. Hu Jun had made a good start, even though the children did not pay much attention to him. The energetic boys were already running around and making a ruckus. Only Kiki, who had not eaten her fill, sat beside her father like a lady and listened to the adults sing. Sing about my current mood, Last Supper. Liu Yi also stood up, But no one knew that this joker would sing the following song that did not match the tune. Tonight's cold wind has torn my heart to shreds, hurried footsteps, I won't return until I'm drunk. Liu Yi even lifted one hand and strummed the other in front of him, as if he was playing a guitar. The hazy drizzle has its hazy beauty, another cup of wine, especially good. Especially good. We've reached the climax. Hu Jun smiled as he stood up. He raised his wine glass and drank a toast. At this part, the fathers were feeling a little emotional, but the children were still giggling, as if they did not feel the sadness of their father's parting. This was also right. Liu Yi's song, The Man in Pain, seemed to be sung for the 5 fathers. Over the past few trips, although they were busy taking care of the children, they had a lot of communication. They had even left the 5 fathers of the children to do missions several times, which made them very good brothers regardless of whether the age gap was a little big or not. Between brothers, shouldn't they drink and cry? Poplar Fruit's eyes were a little red. The little rascal did not notice. She grinned and smiled brightly. Papa, I think Uncle Liu Yi sings very well. Seeing the commotion, the village chief smiled and looked at Poplar Fruit, saying, Next, it's Poplar Fruit's turn. Poplar Fruit stood up with his wine glass raised in embarrassment. He smiled and said, Everyone knows that my singing isn't very good. The fathers all laughed. Kiki was also laughing uncontrollably. The little rascal really did not give her fathers any face. However, this was also something that everyone knew. The netizens even gave Poplar Fruit a nickname, Singing God. It meant that he was a singing lunatic. His tune was not something that a normal person could sing. It's all right. No matter what you sing today, we will listen to it. The fathers all clapped to encourage Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, All right, I've also prepared a simpler song. It's a song that we all know when we graduate from school, outside the pavilion. Beside the ancient road. Fragrant green grass. Poplar Fruit finally did not go out of tune. This song was like a drawn-out poem. It couldn't be any simpler. If Poplar Fruit still sang it wrong, Venerable Hongi would probably jump out from the ground and knock on his head. This song was too familiar. Almost everyone in China who had studied would be able to hum it. A goblet of turbid wine consumes the remaining joy. Farewell to the cold dreams tonight. In this poetic lyrics and sad tune, Poplar Fruit's gentle singing was like the night breeze. It was very gentle, but it captured everyone's hearts. In the end, it still had to end. Just like this song, just like this season's program, just like this book, Papa, I feel so bad. Kiki's face was covered in tears. She grabbed her father's pants and said with a choked voice. Chapter 1483. The little girl's reaction was completely different from Kang and the rest. The boys were going crazy from playing. They were chasing after each other like 4 demon kings. On the other hand, Kiki's sad narration and her watery eyes that looked like they were about to cry made the fathers surprised. Then, they could not help but laugh. What are you sad about? Poplar Fruit also laughed. He patted the little girl's head and asked, Do you understand what Daddy is singing? To be honest, this song was very abstract. It was like an ancient Chinese poem. It used scenery to express emotions and objects to describe people. It did not even have the word sorrow, but it filled every note with sorrow. People who did not have a deep understanding of ancient Chinese or did not have a deep understanding of Chinese would find it difficult to understand. No matter how smart Chichi was, she was only a little over 4 years old. How could she understand the deep emotions hidden behind words so thoroughly? I don't understand. The little girl pouted and shook her head, saying, But I feel very touched. Ha ha, ha ha. It's right to be touched, it's right to be touched. Poplar Fruit and the rest laughed again. Kiki was too cute. She could hear the emotions in the tone. It was vague, but it made her heart ache. It was not easy to see such an adorable contrast between the two of them. Poplar Fruit saw his daughter's puzzled look and gently smiled at her, saying, It's fine. You will understand in the future. The reason why he didn't explain it to Chichi wasn't because Chichi wasn't that old yet, but because he didn't really want the little fellow to cry her eyes out right now. How nice would it be if she could laugh heartlessly like Nuo Yi and Da Jun? Alright, Who's next? The village chief smiled. Hu Jun's ancientness, Liu Yi's exuberance, and Poplar Fruit's profoundness all had their own characteristics. The audience did not pay much attention to this segment at the beginning, but at this moment, the viewership ratings gradually rose. Everyone was very curious about how the fathers would perform next. Teacher Lin. Zhu Shimin smiled. He's prepared a wonderful performance, really. Lin Yongjian did not decline. He stood up with the wine in his hand. He still looked like an old cadre, but he spread out his hands and said in a friendly manner, "I'm going to sing this song. May our friendship last forever." The name of the song was Auld Lang Syne. It had a very good meaning. Where are you going, Daddy? Before everyone could react, Lin Yongjian's bel canto voice stunned everyone. However, why was the lyrics a bit wrong? Papa, where are you going? We have to finish recording, we have to go home. It was the same way that Hu Jun had altered the lyrics. But, it sounded much better than Hu Jun's. Teacher Lin's bel canto voice had a certain charm to it. It was very pleasant to listen to. Of course, there was still a lack of energy, but this did not stop everyone from quietly enjoying it. Even the boys who were exuberant stopped and looked at him to listen. But we feel a little reluctant to part with you, tilde friends. Friends, let's drink together and sing together. Listening to Teacher Lin's singing, the fathers picked up their wine glasses and stood up one after another. There were signs of tears rolling in their eyes. Long live our friendship will never change, our friendship will last forever. Very miraculously, the little girl was not touched. She really did not understand it this time. Of course, she still gave a thumbs up to Teacher Lin's singing. Let's make our friendship last forever. Hu Jun raised his glass and proposed. The dads all drank their glasses. Logically speaking, the singing here had already reached the peak of the atmosphere. It should have come to an end. However, wasn't Zhu Shimin not singing yet? The village chief chuckled and said, "I really want to hear you sing, Shimin." Zhu Shimin actually did not have any good ideas. Moreover, with Lin Yongjian in front of him, the other songs he sang were not up to standard. However, Zhu Shimin, who had a high EQ, immediately had an idea. He said emotionally, "Perhaps after tonight's dinner, after we finish recording the show tomorrow, this season will really end." Kiki looked at Zhu Shimin with her mouth slightly agape. This time, she seemed to have understood. "If it's possible, everyone can sing the last line of our theme song together," Zhu Shimin suggested. This line was very familiar to everyone because they had once spent a lot of effort in the recording room to sing this line. "Baby, baby." Zhu Shimin started. Everyone could not help but sing. They went from soft voices to loud voices. With a wave of the hand of time, "You are forever precious." Time passed too quickly. It was as if a few months ago was just the beginning. At that time, everyone had just gotten to know each other through their first journey. Then, they had already become good friends. At that time, everyone was still very happy. Even when they sang this line, they sang it with a happy mood. Unlike now, when they were singing, they were thinking about parting. They were thinking about the deep friendship they had formed over the past few episodes. And all of this was just like the lyrics. "You are forever precious." Although the lyrics were talking about the babies, the friendship between fathers and children, wasn't it just as precious? Everyone sang with all their might. It was unknown how many of them were like Lin Yongjian, pulling out the last note with their eyes closed. They closed their eyes because tears were welling up in their eyes. They dragged out the notes because they did not want it to end for a long time. Dinner was over. The children were also tired from playing. Finally, they followed their fathers back to their rooms. They were considered to be more fortunate because they were not able to feel the deep sorrow of parting. Of course, Kiki was an exception. The little girl cried for a while at the end. Poplar Fruit returned to the room and fetched hot water for the little girl to wash her face and hands. Under the warm towel, Kiki's pink little face and red eyes faded away. "What is this?" Kiki was lying on the bed with her little feet dangling behind her. She curiously pulled over a big book that her father had brought back and asked. "It's our photo." After Poplar Fruit put the things away, he sat down next to his daughter and patted the bed. The little girl consciously turned over and then burrowed into her father's arms like a little worm. He opened the book, or more accurately, the album. On the first page, Poplar Fruit saw the first photo of him and Kiki. "Do you remember this one?" Poplar Fruit smiled. "You were dressed like a princess." "Yes, yes." Kiki smiled happily. "Xian even helped me lift my skirt." "Yes. And this one too." Poplar Fruit turned a page and said, "Dad was not with you. You and brother Kang went to do a task." "Yes, we went to sell ducklings. A duckling almost died." Kiki was a little nostalgic and smiled happily. "But Papa, do you know? That duckling didn't die. It came back to life later." Poplar Fruit nodded and looked at the little girl with a smile. Chapter 1484. Talking about photos, Poplar Fruit and his daughter could talk for a few hours. That was because the photos in the album contained many stories. Poplar Fruit and Kiki's memory was still super strong, so the conversation was a bit endless. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit also remembered a small task given by the production team. At an appropriate time, Poplar Fruit cut in and asked, "Kiki, after the show is over, will you miss Kang, Dajuan, Nuoyi, and Xian?" "Yes." Kiki's voice was a little low. It was unknown whether it was because she was tired or because she couldn't lift her spirit. The little girl put her small hand in between her father's big hand, then used her other hand to pull her father's fingers and let him hold her small hand. "I will miss them very, very much," Kiki said softly. "But didn't Papa say before? Even if we don't record the show, we can still meet and play together in the future." Poplar Fruit smiled and nodded. "Yes, if there's a chance in the future, Papa will bring you to play with them." Kiki was tired. She had played very happily today. Moreover, she had just come back after 9 o'clock. The younger Xian and Nuoyi were so tired that they fell asleep on their father's shoulders and were then carried back. Kiki's physical fitness was better, but she couldn't avoid it. After coaxing the little girl to sleep, Poplar Fruit took the phone that he had asked for when the production team distributed the photo album. He walked out of the door, passed through the corridor, and went to the balcony outside. He wanted to call Fong Beibei. Usually, he had nothing to do at home, but now, Fong Beibei had come to Australia with him. Although the production team staff and the other children's mothers were accompanying them, they were still unfamiliar with this place. Poplar Fruit had to be concerned. In the end, when he turned on his phone, a bunch of text messages kept ringing. Usually, whenever he recorded a show, there would be a lot of missed calls. However, this time, Yang Guoshun looked at it and found that Zheng Yujie had called him so many times that his phone almost exploded. Starting from 12 o'clock in the afternoon, he called every few minutes until 5 o'clock in the evening. What happened? Poplar Fruit was shocked. He knew that Zheng Yujie was not the kind of person who would call non-stop. In the past, whenever Poplar Fruit turned off his phone and refused to answer her calls, the cold and aloof sister Zheng would throw her phone aside and wait for Poplar Fruit to call back. In the end, Poplar Fruit would apologize obediently. Based on her personality, she wouldn't be so agitated unless something big had happened. Poplar Fruit was also a little flustered. He called Zhang Yujie back first. It was 10 o'clock. There was no time difference between Beijing and Perth, so it should be 10 o'clock in Guangzhou as well. Plus, Zheng Yujie definitely wasn't asleep at this time. Beep, beep, beep. The phone rang for a long time. Poplar Fruit anxiously shouted in his heart, "Hurry up and answer the phone." Finally, just as the phone was about to hang up, Zheng Yujie's voice finally came from the receiver. "Hello." It wasn't the slightly confused hello that most people would say on the phone. Instead, it was a slightly raised hello that sounded a little happy and a little angry. What happened? Poplar Fruit heard Zheng Yujie's voice. It sounded like there was no big problem. His hanging heart was half relieved. He asked, "Why did you call me hundreds of times? You still have the nerve to say that." On the other end of the phone, Zheng Yujie seemed to heave a sigh of relief. She immediately returned to her usual tone and said, "I called you this morning, but you didn't answer. My phone was turned off. How was I supposed to answer it?" Poplar Fruit laughed. "How would I know?" Zhang Yujie said rudely. She then stammered, "I called you this morning, and I called you this afternoon. Your phone was turned off." Who knows? Did you blacklist me? Poplar Fruit checked his phone. There were too many text messages. Only now did he realize that Zheng Yujie had called him this morning. What Poplar Fruit didn't know was that Zheng Yujie had called him yesterday as well. However, at that time, Poplar Fruit's phone had been turned off and taken away by the program crew. Zheng Yujie panicked when she realized that Poplar Fruit's phone was still turned off in the afternoon. Not only did she call him the whole afternoon, she even hid at home at night. Her eyes were swollen from crying. This was something that Poplar Fruit didn't know. I didn't record the show. I'm still in Perth. Poplar Fruit laughed. Don't worry, I won't block you. Why would I block you? Poplar Fruit didn't understand why Zheng Yujie was suddenly so sensitive. Wasn't it because Poplar Fruit was a little too cold to Zheng Yujie? After the quarrel, he didn't call Zheng Yujie. Although this was also because he was very busy, had guests at home, and had to go abroad. Where is Perth? Zheng Yujie changed the topic. It's in Australia, a big city in Western Australia. Poplar Fruit laughed. Kiki and I even pretended to be primitive people. Poplar Fruit described their experience in Western Australia. Of course, Poplar Fruit also deliberately avoided the sensitive topic of Fong Beibei. I want to watch this episode. Zhang Yujie laughed. Maybe I'll want to come to Perth for a vacation in the future. Maybe you won't want to come to this place in the future, because someone will show off their love here. Well, back to the topic. Poplar Fruit asked puzzledly, you called me. Is there something urgent? Yes. But can't I call you if there's nothing urgent? Zhang Yujie said with a raised voice. She found that Poplar Fruit was still the original Poplar Fruit, so she felt relieved. Hey, that's not what I meant. If you have something to say, just say it. Yang Guo helplessly smiled. Zhang Yujie stopped fooling around and said seriously, there's a meeting next Friday. You have to come back to the company. Friday? Poplar Fruit was a little embarrassed. Tomorrow was Monday, and he wanted to stay in Australia for the next week. It was rare to have a vacation with Fong Beibei. The beach, the coast, what a great vacation spot. Why, you can't come back. Zhang Yujie sensed it and said, this meeting is very important. The country is going to introduce a support policy for the translation of literary works, and we are included in the first batch of pilot enterprises. It was the first time Poplar Fruit heard about this. This is a very important opportunity for us. We have to use this opportunity to develop ourselves quickly, and it's best if we can seize the right to speak in this industry. Do you understand? Zheng Yujie was not joking with Poplar Fruit. This matter was quite important. Got it. I'll give you an answer after the recording tomorrow, okay? Poplar Fruit said helplessly to Zhang Yujie. He had to explain this to Fong Beibei first. If this was the case, their vacation would be ruined. Chapter 1485. Okay. Sister Zheng snapped her fingers, and it was as if the cold night of Perth was shaken by it. However, she did not intend to let Poplar Fruit go. After knowing that she was overthinking, Zheng Yujie said in a relaxed mood, Okay, it's still early, right? It's almost 11 o'clock here. I'm going to sleep. It's 11 o'clock in Perth, okay? Also, when did you start sleeping so early? Poplar Fruit could not complain, but Zheng Yujie did not give him the chance to. She quickly said, that's all. Go do your work. I'll see you in my office on Friday. Then, the phone beeped and hung up. Poplar Fruit looked at his phone helplessly. He really did not know what to do with her. He had not even agreed, and she had already taken the lead. After calming himself down, Poplar Fruit called Fong Beibei. After a call with Zhang Yujie, it was indeed 11 o'clock, and Fong Beibei was about to go to sleep. So, when Poplar Fruit called, as expected, Fong Beibei had already fallen asleep, and her voice was heavy with tiredness. Uncle. Baby, are you going to sleep? Poplar Fruit asked. Fong Beibei groaned, but it was a little nasal, and Poplar Fruit was sharp enough to hear it. Why do I hear that your nose is a little stuffy? Poplar Fruit asked with concern. I went out to play in the afternoon, and I seem to have caught a cold. Fong Beibei said. Are you still filming? It's so late. You must be tired. She was also concerned about poplar fruit. No, today's filming is over. Kiki is also sleeping. I asked the crew for a phone, poplar fruit said with a smile. I thought you would come in the afternoon. Kiki had a lot of fun on the farm. Hihi, let me tell you. There will be a big surprise tomorrow. Fong Bebe finally became a little more spirited. She laughed in a muffled voice. Although her nose was stuffed, her happy mood was still transmitted through the airwaves. Really? Poplar fruit smiled. I'm suddenly looking forward to tomorrow. Hihi, we spent the whole day yesterday. Aya, I can't tell you so much, or else I'll spoil it. Fong Bebe said. Ooh. Ooh. Before he could finish his sentence, poplar fruit suddenly heard Fong Bebe vomiting. Poplar fruit became anxious. Baby, what's wrong? It's fine, it's fine. It's not serious, Fong Bebe said. It seems that it's because of the seafood I ate yesterday. I don't have a good appetite today. The lobsters we sent. Poplar fruit asked in confusion. Yes. Fong Bebe said. We don't seem to have any problems. Everyone ate it, poplar fruit said with a frown. Do you feel a stomachache? No, the other sisters didn't feel any problems either. Fong Bebe comforted poplar fruit and said, maybe it's because we ate too late and ate it as a midnight snack, so we had indigestion. But you also caught a cold. You have a stomachache again, poplar fruit said nervously. You have to go to the hospital. Stupid uncle. Although Fong Bebe's voice was muffled, the sweetness in her voice almost attracted bees. It's late at night. Where can I go to see a doctor? Poplar fruit thought for a while and said, do you want me to pick you up? He felt that his language was not a problem, so it was much better than troubling the other members of the program team. Fong Bebe said, no need. I'm so sleepy. I want to sleep. This coquettish behavior was comparable to Kiki's. Poplar fruit raised his eyebrows and wanted to insist, but Fong Bebe said, don't worry, don't worry. I'm really fine. The cold is not serious. It's just that my nose is a little blocked and my stomach doesn't hurt. I just feel a little nauseous. Maybe it's because I'm not acclimatized. If it's really serious, I won't hide it from you. Then after the program recording tomorrow, I'll take you to the hospital for a checkup, Poplar fruit said after thinking for a while. Indeed, there was no need to make a fuss. He was a little worried just now. Okay, Fong Bebe said. Then you should rest early and cover yourself with the quilt, Poplar fruit said. Okay. Fong Bebe replied with her actions. Poplar fruit heard the sound of her moving the quilt through the phone. I'm covered. Fong Bebe said sweetly, Uncle, you should go to bed early too. Okay, good night, Poplar fruit said with a smile. Good night. Fong Bebe said and hung up the phone. After putting down the phone, Poplar fruit went back to his room. Only then did he remember that he didn't tell Fong Bebe that he wanted to go home early. However, he quickly shook his head and didn't care too much. It was still early. He would talk about it after the program recording tomorrow. Compared to going back early for the meeting, Poplar fruit was more concerned about, or rather, worried about Fong Bebe's health. The night passed quickly. Early in the morning, when the sky was just beginning to brighten, Poplar fruit got up to exercise. He ran to the small rooftop. The place was just right, so he didn't need to disturb the staff's rest. More than an hour later, Poplar fruit saw a bus coming from afar under the golden light of the rising sun. Poplar fruit suddenly had a premonition. He quickly jumped down the stairs. He didn't put on his shoes properly, so he ran out on his heels. Someone had already come down. When Poplar fruit went out, he saw Fong Bebe coming down from the bus with a smile. The smile on Poplar fruit's face was as bright as the sunlight jumping between the branches and leaves of the small forest in front of him. He opened his arms and hugged Fong Bebe, who was jumping up to greet him. The filming hadn't started yet. Other than the cameraman who came with the bus and took 2 photos, the cameras in the villa and in the car hadn't been turned on yet. But why would they need these extra bystanders? Love was contained in the hearts of the 2 people. It was expressed in the eyes of the other person, and there was no more mixing. Do you feel better? Poplar fruit asked gently. Fong Bebe said happily, listen to my voice. Her nose was not blocked, and her voice was clear and pleasant. How about your stomach? It's also better. It's just that I don't really want to eat seafood now. Fong Beibei pouted and said, It's a pity, a pity. It was indeed a waste to come to Western Australia, where there was so much seafood to eat, but they couldn't eat seafood. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, Well, when you're completely better, I'll cook more delicious food for you when we get home. It was a bit too much of a show of affection. Lu Fang coughed twice and said, Hey, there's a child here. She didn't know if they had considered the existence of the child when they were showing affection in the later part of the program. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei hadn't kissed yet. The two of them just hugged each other. Hearing Lu Fang's words, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei changed to holding hands. He smiled and said, Good morning, sisters-in-law. And also, Ju Nina, Hao. Hello. Nina and Hao had just woken up and were in a confused state, so they didn't respond. But the eldest girl, Ju openly greeted Poplar Fruit. Chapter 1486. The arrival of the group of mothers brought fresh and lively air to the sleepy villa. Of course, that was after a round of laughter. Except for Poplar Fruit, who always got up early, the other four fathers were still curled up in their warm beds. There was no shooting in the morning, so they slept in. With a smirk on his face, Poplar Fruit pointed to the rooms where each family was. Then, ignoring the surprised and happy cries behind him, he pulled his wife and ran back to his room with a smile. Mama. Kiki, who had slept enough, was woken up by the noise of the door opening. The little girl poked her head out of the bed, squinted her eyes, and screamed in surprise. Kiki, you're awake? Fong Beibei threw Poplar Fruit down and threw herself on the bed with a smile. She looked at the little girl's big eyes and laughed together. Mama, you're here so early. The little girl reached out and hung it around Fang Beibei's neck. She pressed her body on the bed and stretched lazily. Then, she giggled. I came to see you. Mama missed you and Papa. Did you miss Mama? Fong Beibei laughed. Kiki nodded and said seriously, I missed you so much. My dear Mama, let's see if you're telling the truth, Fong Beibei said with a smile, and then got a kiss from Kiki. Of course, she immediately responded. Poplar Fruit was not to be outdone. He put aside the suitcases brought by Fong Beibei, climbed up, and said with a smile, I missed you so much too. Fong Beibei pressed one hand on Poplar Fruit's chest, separated him, and said with a naughty smile, No, you're sweaty, go take a shower, go. The little girl burrowed into Fang Beibei's arms. Now that she had someone to rely on, she waved at her father and smiled secretly. Why didn't you say anything when you hugged me just now? What was with the look of disdain in front of the child? Poplar Fruit complained in his heart. Of course, he also knew that he was sweating profusely after exercising. This was an indisputable fact. And Kiki. The little guy had learned bad things. After having a mother, he really didn't want his biological father anymore. Poplar Fruit smiled helplessly and went into the bathroom. Breakfast was also a joyous occasion. The 5 families sat together and ate happily. The production crew did not even turn on the cameras because according to the script, it was not the time for filming yet. The fathers also rejoiced. This trip was really too blissful. After seeing the primitive people, the production crew had much less trouble. They no longer had to wake up in the morning to exercise and eat. After breakfast, everyone got on the bus and went to a small farm nearby that was specially used for weddings. The clean lawn, the bright green, and the neat and flat construction made it look like the home ground of Real Madrid Bernabeu. What could not be ignored was the neatly placed vertical flower racks. Bunches of white flowers decorated the top, and green vines hung down to cover the flower racks. It made people feel as if the flowers had appeared out of thin air. The 2 rows of flowers formed a wide and straight path. Anyone could tell that this path was going to be an important recording location for today's segment. Behind the path was a relatively new glass wooden house. From the outside, it looked a bit like the kind of houses that Western tycoons lived in movies. It was very modern, and the brand new feeling of the wood made people feel that they could live in it and feel the fragrance of the forest. Of course, When Poplar Fruit and the others walked in, that was not the case. It was actually empty inside. There was a large living room with a few rows of sofas. It was probably for them to sit on while they waited. The mother group brought the 3 children who came later and followed the assistant director sister to a few large rooms at the back. Before Fong Beibei left, she mischievously whispered in Poplar Fruit's ear, "Please look forward to it." Look forward to what? Could Poplar Fruit not guess? Although Poplar Fruit and the others were not allowed to go in, there was a room in front that was filled with rows of black suits. Coupled with the decoration outside, how could Poplar Fruit not guess what Fong Beibei and the others were going to do? However, even though she said that, Yang Guo was really looking forward to it. What would Fong Beibei look like when she put on the wedding dress? Poplar Fruit still remembered the holiness of the old granny after she put on the wedding dress during the first trip. He also remembered the stunning appearance of the models wearing the wedding dress during the Ba Li Fashion Week. Of course, there was also Fong Beibei. She was so charming when she wore the bridesmaid's wedding dress at Song Jiwen's wedding. They were all different kinds of beauty, but they were not complete. Even today, Poplar Fruit felt that it was not complete enough. However, Poplar Fruit wanted to see it very much. It was like looking forward to dessert before a big meal. He looked forward to Fong Beibei wearing the wedding dress before their official wedding. The 2 of them would have a rehearsal. "Let's go and change our clothes." Poplar Fruit smiled, patted his daughter's shoulder, and walked into the room. "What clothes are you changing into?" Chichi looked around curiously. Poplar Fruit looked at the rows of men's suits. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He smiled and said, "Kiki, can you wear a suit today?" If Kiki dressed up as a man, she might be very handsome. Thinking about it, the little girl also had a pair of long legs and a beautiful face. If she changed into a well-ironed long suit pants, changed into a shirt, put on a bow, and put on a slender suit jacket, then tied her hair up, put on a small top hat, and posed in a classic Michael Jackson pose, wouldn't she look like a handsome little boy? Of course, Kiki's face was still a little soft, unlike her father's, whose facial features were like a sculpture. After all, she was a girl. After she put on men's clothes, she was not Lin Qingxia's version of Dongfang Bubai. Perhaps she was more like Zhao Ling played by Liu Yifei, who dressed up as a man and went to the brothel. Even if she wore men's clothes, one could still tell that she was a girl at a glance. Because of her beautiful eyes, her pursed lips, or her shyness when she lowered her head, she did not need to have a graceful figure to make men's hearts sway. "Okay," Kiki replied in a daze. She did not know that her father was playing with her. Of course, if the show really had such a gentleman's outfit that suited Kiki, Poplar Fruit might really make it real and let Kiki try it on. But unfortunately, this show was called Where Are You Going, Daddy? It was not called the 100 Changes Show. How could such an educational and entertaining program come up with such a nonsensical crosstalk? Don't listen to your father's lies. The assistant director sister, who had returned, smiled and exposed Poplar Fruit's joke. She took Kiki's little hand and said, "Kiki, come with me. I will take you to change your clothes. We have prepared a super beautiful princess dress for you." "I like princess dresses." "That's great." Kiki jumped up happily. It was a pity that Cinderella had to become a princess in the end, not a prince. Chapter 1487. The audience did not see this scene. Otherwise, they would probably be full of resentment towards the production team. Compared to Chichi, who was already very familiar with wearing a princess dress, they were more interested in Chichi dressing up like a little prince. Of course, if they did not see it, they would treat it as if it did not happen. First, he put on some light makeup. Then, Poplar Fruit changed into a tailor-made suit made by the production team. It was not just a suit. In addition to the leather shoes, trousers, belt, and shirt, he also tied a black bow around his neck. The most eye-catching thing was Poplar Fruit's coat. It was handmade from high-quality wool tweed fabric. The black color was very pure, and the smooth and soft texture was very elastic. There were no creases at all. The main thing was that it was a little slender at the back. The back of the coat was in the shape of a tailcoat with 2 slits. This meant that it was not an ordinary suit, but a tailcoat worn by Western men when they attended some high-end banquet. Even if it was a tailcoat, not everyone could wear it well. After all, there was a tail at the back. Those with shorter legs might have to hang down to the ground. However, Poplar Fruit was the opposite. His pair of long legs complemented the tailcoat, making him look even more tall and elegant. Therefore, when Poplar Fruit quickly changed his clothes and took the lead to walk out, he stole the souls of the female scriptwriters, female assistants, and other female staff in the production team who were between 20 and 40 years old. Too handsome. He was like a prince leading a white horse out of the dense fog of the forest. No, it was like a handsome knight leaning out of an open window of a castle and looking down with deep affection. No, it was more like a noble young master in a British manor riding a horse carriage. Everyone seemed to have their own opinion. After arguing, they realized that Poplar Fruit had become so charming just by changing into a tailcoat. It was enough to satisfy everyone's fantasies. "Teacher Yang, I want to take a picture with you." A female assistant ran up with a blushing face. Although she was blushing, her actions were not shy. She directly hooked her arm around Poplar Fruit's arm and took a selfie with him. In an instant, requests to take a picture flooded in. As for the female assistant who inspired everyone, no one knew when she had joined the queue. When she came up, everyone noticed that she was holding a tall gentleman's hat and a long walking stick. This was definitely a good item from the prop department of the wooden house. "Do you want to wear it?" Poplar Fruit was a little surprised, but his personality was more easygoing. He smiled and satisfied the other party's request. With a tall hat on his head and a walking stick in his hand, Poplar Fruit seemed to have transformed into a noble gentleman. Of course, there were 2 mustaches missing from his mouth. It was also because of the lack of these 2 mustaches that the Poplar Fruit looked very young. Moreover, he had an otherworldly elegance, just like a frivolous young count. The female assistant was grinning from ear to ear. She passed the phone to her friend and pinched her skirt. She stood beside Poplar Fruit like an obedient maid and took a cosplay photo. Scheming bitch. Who knew how many women cursed in their hearts? Although they cursed, this creative idea inspired them. Then, all kinds of fancy poses came to Poplar Fruit. In the end, it was the director who was laughing secretly and rescued Poplar Fruit. To be honest, the suit was really one of the best inventions of human artists. There was almost no man who did not look handsome after wearing a suit. A few fathers and a few little boys came out one after another, causing waves of exclamations. Needless to say, after changing into formal attire, they no longer looked as sloppy as they usually did. Even Lin Yongjian had become elegant and handsome. When Nuo Yi and the rest came out, they caused even louder cheers than Poplar Fruit. The older sisters and aunties' eyes lit up as they watched Nuo Yi and the rest walk out. Each of the little gentlemen wore a fitting suit. The word cute and handsome exploded in their minds. Actually, the little guys were still not used to the constraints of the suit. After wearing the suit, they could not jump around casually, nor could they fight and play as they please. Even when they raised their hands, they felt bound by the suit. Therefore, after they came out, they twisted and turned from time to time, as if trying to find a suitable position. Fortunately, the quality of the suit was still very good. It was not to the extent that it would tear when they bent down. Finally, Poplar Fruit waited for the little princess that he had been eagerly waiting for. Kiki was pulled out of the wooden house by the older sister assistant director. It was as if she had her own background music. She smiled sweetly, and instantly, the white flowers on both sides dimmed. The brilliance was stolen by Kiki. She was really a little princess. Her outfit was too beautiful. The fluffy lace dress had a little lotus-like collar at the neck, but it was not too high. The bright white princess dress was so elegant. Half of her sleeves were exposed, and her fair and slender arms were half exposed to the air. Fortunately, the sun was out now, and the air outside was warm and not as cold as it was at night. If the production team's custom-made dress for Kiki made the little girl look more like a princess, then the 2 streamers that were gently and loosely wrapped around Kiki's arms were the finishing touch. The woolen silk gloves covered Kiki's forearms, making her look elegant and unique. The streamers that were as white as clouds fluttered on Kiki's fair and flawless arms, as if adding a celestial aura. The little princess Kiki, who had risen from a human empress princess to a celestial fairy princess, made her frown and smile between the clouds feel very distant, but also very close. What princess was more beautiful than Kiki now? Even the staff members who were addicted to taking photos with her could only secretly admire her. They did not dare to rashly go up, and they did not even dare to exclaim. It was as if their heavy breathing would disturb the fairy-like little princess in front of them. Wow, Kiki, you're so beautiful. Fortunately, there were a few little guys who did not know anything. Nuoyi laughed and ran over. The onlookers looked at the daredevil with dissatisfaction, but they could not do anything about it. Later, Kang Kang and the others also came over. Xian Xian was even more stunned, and he did not respond to Zhu Shimin's call. Xian Xian, Xian Xian, Xian Xian. Finally, Xian Xian turned his head and looked at his father in confusion, as if he wanted to say, "Don't disturb me, I'm looking at the fairy sister." Zhu Shimin helplessly spread out his hands. He wanted to secretly give his son away to take off his coat and let Kiki put it on, but looking at the boy's confused look, Zhu Shimin gave up. Even Zhuge Liang could not help a doe. Kiki was surrounded by her friends, and she pursed her lips and smiled shyly. It seemed that after she put on the dress, she was also bound by the princess's rules, and she became a little restrained. Actually, this little girl was imitating the real princess she had seen before, the Princess Charlotte of Morocco. She was lucky that she still remembered. Chapter 1488. After messing around for a while, the recording was finally about to begin. The fathers stood in a row. Yang Guo, Liu Yi, and Hu Jun, the three long-legged men, led the way, while Zhu Shimin and Lin Yongjian, the two capable fresh meat, stood in the middle. It was like a luxurious and aged version of a handsome group. The main thing was their temperament. The five of them present were all successful people in their own fields. Even Poplar Fruit had a maturity that exceeded his age. The most important thing was the gentle smile that they gave their children. It was enough to charm 99% of the female viewers in front of their televisions. There was no other way. The guests chosen for Where Are We Going, Daddy, were all good male celebrities. This was where their advantage lay. The camera panned down. There were four cute and handsome young men, as well as a beautiful and well-behaved young lady. After Kiki put on that elegant and exquisite princess dress, she became a lady. If the previous program was said to make everyone laugh, then the latter program was purely pleasing to the eyes. The men were handsome, and the women were beautiful. Every scene, if taken separately, was a poster that people could not get enough of. The program did not give everyone much time to take screenshots or lick the screen. This was because the village chief then told everyone that he had prepared a huge surprise for the dads and the children. Although this was no longer a secret, and the program's preview had also revealed some of the later scenes, even the dads present looked longingly at the wooden house. Who would be the first to walk out? Real music started playing. It was not the kind of music that came with Kiki's appearance, but a real orchestra sitting in a small pavilion by the side. They were using cellos, violins, and even accordions to play. Could it be Mama? Kiki moved. She wanted to ask her dads, but she remembered that the village chief had said that spoilers were not to be revealed, so she could only hold it back. The opaque glass door was pushed open and two people walked out holding hands. The camera panned up, as if the curtains were slowly being lifted. Of the two beauties, the older one was wearing a dark-colored evening gown. She had a graceful and dignified posture, while the younger one was wearing a dark green silk dress. She was slim and elegant. It was Hu Jun's wife and daughter. When Lu Fang and Zhu walked out of the wooden house, Kang Kang screamed. She immediately ran back behind her father and only dared to stick her head out to look. The changes were too big. Just a moment ago, they appeared in the villa in casual clothes. Now, Mama and Zhu were dressed so beautifully. They even had a noble aura, which made Kang Kang unable to adapt. Kang, come. Hu Jun held a rose and patted Kang Kang's shoulder. But after taking 2 steps, he realized that Kang Kang was too embarrassed to come up. Mama, Zhu said, Mama Kang Kang gijtatu, Zhu, Zhu. At that moment, Kang Kang seemed to be affected by her homesickness. When she saw her mother and sister dressed so beautifully, she shrank back. Kang Kang. Ju smiled and waved at Kang Kang. Ju was only 14 years old, but she was as beautiful as a 17 or 18-year-old girl. Hu Jun must have brought her to see the world. She was cheerful and generous, unlike a 14-year-old girl. Hearing her sister's call, Kang Kang finally ran over. The family smiled and hugged each other. Lu Fang and Ju appearance surprised the audience. Ju who had always been well protected by Hu Jun, was the focus of the audience. The fathers present were also full of praise. Compared to Kiki, who was still a mini beauty, Ju was really the kind of girl next door who had just grown up. Didn't they see Zhu Shimin laughing and saying that she and her mother looked like sisters standing together? They were about the same height, and their appearance was even better, especially after she put on makeup and changed into a cheongsam. She really attracted the attention of all the men present. Thus, the little girl suddenly felt that she was being neglected. Kiki pouted and shook her father's clothes. When her father put his hand down and pressed it on her shoulder, the little girl grabbed her father's hand. She was a little jealous. Although she only felt that she was being neglected by her father, she couldn't tolerate it. How could her father think that other sisters were more beautiful than Kiki? Even the photographer didn't notice that Kiki grabbed her father's hand to stop him from taking photos, but Poplar Fruit immediately understood. How could a father not understand his daughter's thoughts? Poplar Fruit laughed in surprise. He lowered his head and covered the microphone with his hand. He smiled and said in his daughter's ear, "It's okay, you'll be more beautiful when you grow up." Although it was only a promise of the future, after her father finished speaking, Kiki also beamed with joy. She was a girl after all. How could she not care about her position in the eyes of the people she cared about? Even if Kiki said that she wasn't the prettiest girl in kindergarten, she would at least hope that her father would think that she was the prettiest and cutest among her peers. Hu Jun's family waited by the side. The second group of guests was about to appear. This time, without the village chief's reminder, everyone clapped hard, looking forward to the next mother's arrival. The audience was also looking forward to it. At this moment, they were like farmers who had dug up a piece of ore. They were pleasantly surprised to find that other than the fathers and children, there was also such an eye-catching family member. Especially the male audience, when they saw Ju their attention was immediately focused. They saw the door being pushed open and two beauties stood at the door. Of course, this time, it was really one big and one small. Unlike Lu Fang, who had the grace of a Chinese woman, Liu Yi's French wife, Anna, had the romantic and classical aura of a French beauty. Her clothes were very simple. She wore a short-sleeved pure white t-shirt without any prints. The hem of her shirt was completely tucked into a beige, straight skirt. A slightly darker apricot-colored belt was tied around her waist like a dividing line. Although it was very simple, it matched perfectly. Not only did it show off her graceful figure, it also accentuated her elegant temperament. Anna was like a flower on a flower stand on both sides, stunning the entire screen. As for the little beauty, Nina, who was beside her, she wore pantyhose, a long skirt, and a classical jacket. She looked slightly reserved, but she was also exquisite and charming. Just like her mother, Nina was wearing a headband. Of course, her headband had a pair of cute bows hanging out of her hair, which made her slightly nervous smile even more adorable. Chapter 1489. It seemed like when Kang Kang was too embarrassed to go forward, Nuo Yi was also in the group laughing. But now, it was his turn to not dare to go forward. The little boy giggled and hid behind Poplar Fruit. On the other hand, after Liu Yi called out to Nuo Yi, he could not hold back the joy in his heart. He took the flowers from the village chief and strode forward. Nuo Yi, quickly go up. Everyone laughed and urged Nuo Yi. Kang Kang was relieved and had forgotten that she was in such a predicament as well. She shouted, "Nuo Yi, quickly go and find your sister." Unknowingly, Kang Kang had placed a product placement advertisement for a famous mobile game. Of course, it was unintentional. Liu Yi ignored him. He walked directly to his French wife. The two of them looked at each other, and their smiles reflected each other's eyes. They were also full of love. Liu Yi, on the other hand, did something that made everyone exclaim without any warning. "Oh, oh." Liu Yi hugged Anna's face and tilted his head to kiss her. Anna also stood on her tiptoes. After all, Anna was not tall, but Liu Yi was 186 meters tall. The moment his parents kissed, Liu Yi stood beside Poplar Fruit and giggled foolishly. His face was red and he almost did not cover his eyes. In comparison, parents nowadays were much more open. Poplar Fruit remembered that when he was young, whenever there was a kissing scene on TV, his parents would make him turn his head away. As for Kiki, she had been exposed to Western culture since she was young. Naturally, she would not find such a thing embarrassing. The little girl turned her head and shook her father's hand. She said, "Daddy, later you have to kiss Mama too." Poplar Fruit laughed and resisted the urge to rub the little girl's head. He could not ruin Kiki's hairstyle and princess crown. He said, "Of course." After Liu Yi and Anna finished showing off their love, Liu Yi was pushed out by everyone. He held hands with his parents and sister and laughed happily together. Of course, Nina was the happiest at this moment because her father could finally hug her. Nina was still at the age of pestering her father. Liu Yi and his family returned to their seats. Although Kang was still bouncing around and interacting intimately with little sister Nina, they were finally going to welcome a new group of guests. Could it be Zhu Shimin's wife and youngest son, who were also a family of 4? The door opened. No, it was just as graceful and beautiful. A woman in a black gauze dress walked out of the door. Her slightly aged face didn't make her already beautiful face pale. Instead, it added a lot of elegance to her. She was Lin Yongjian's wife, Da Jun's mother, and a famous TV drama actress, Zhu Dongqi. Lin Yongjian was still pretending to be calm and waiting for his wife to come up. In the end, Da Jun, who had been peeking from side to side, couldn't hold back anymore. He directly turned around between his father's legs and quickly ran to his mother's side. "Mommy, I love you," Da Jun said as he was hugged in his mother's arms. It was unknown how many people in the audience were touched. It could be said that although Da Jun wasn't the most popular among the 5 children, he was the one who had grown the most. Thinking back to the first time they had met, he had called her father a devil and talked back to her in all sorts of ways. But now, his personality was as gentle as spring water. Although it was not warm enough, it was enough to make people like him. At this moment, Lin Yongjian affectionately walked up with a rose in his hand. But halfway there, Hu Jun, who was full of tricks, jested, "Stop acting, stop acting. Be more sincere at a time like this." It sounded like a piece of advice, but why did he say it so loudly? Why did he sound like he was trying to hold back his laughter? Everyone burst into laughter. The atmosphere created by Lin Yongjian was instantly broken. When Lin Yongjian, who didn't know whether to laugh or cry, was ready to express his feelings again, Da Jun came back and snatched the flower from his father's hand and gave it to his mother. His strength was truly a scam. Fortunately, the atmosphere wasn't ruined this time. Lin Yongjian and his wife stood together. However, the relatively conservative Lin Yongjian and his wife couldn't let go in front of so many people. "Kiss her, kiss her." Lin Yongjian only kissed his wife lightly after everyone cheered him on or urged him to do something that was beyond his ability. Although it wasn't as romantic as the previous 2 couples, the deep affection between an old couple holding hands was still somewhat enviable. And in the melodious sound of the violin, Lin Yongjian and Zhu Dongqi's impromptu dance made people see some of the deeper feelings between them. Of course, if Da Jun wasn't rolling freely on the grass at the side, this scene would be even more intoxicating. The next one disappointed Kiki. The one who walked out of the door wasn't Feng Beibei, but Ran Yingying, who walked out like a flower fairy, and Hao Hao, who was in her arms. "It's okay, your mother is the finale." Poplar Fruit smiled and comforted the little girl in a low voice. She had looked forward to it 4 times in vain. It wasn't unreasonable for Ran Yingying to let the group of mothers call out to the flower fairy. She wore a pink dress, the pleated skirt was like a blooming flower, and the crystal inlaid part was as beautiful as the morning dew hanging on the stamen. Of course, Hao Hao was calmly eating his lollipop. In his mother's arms, he didn't care about the outside world at all. Xian, who was looking forward to his mother's embrace, rushed forward and broke Zhu Shimin's plan. He could only go to the village chief to get the flower. Just as Xian and his mother were tightly hugging, the village chief suddenly exclaimed. She saw Zhu Shimin holding the rose in his mouth, like a Western matador dancing, swaying left and right as he walked up the stage. But Ran Yingying and Xian were still hugging. No one noticed. No, it should be said that Hao saw it. He looked at his father in confusion, but he didn't understand what his father was doing at all. Of course, Zhu Shimin was still very strong and continued his solo dance. Even if he was ignored at first, and then when Xian and Hao passed by, he still walked up to his wife with determination. Finally, the bleak prelude was over. Xian and Hao ran to the side to play, leaving only Hao to present the rose in a very gentlemanly manner. In fact, no one heard what they were saying, but they saw Zhu Shimin stride forward, one hand holding Ran Yingying's waist, as if he was hugging her, the other hand gently pressed on her shoulder. What a beautiful turn! Ran Yingying was pleasantly surprised as Zhu Shimin held her waist and hugged her in the air. Zhu Shimin's hand, which was originally pressing on her shoulder, now wrapped around Ran Yingying's back and hugged her tightly. Then, he lowered his head and kissed her intimately. It was so romantic. However, the fathers in front had used up all their tricks. What was Poplar Fruit going to do? Chapter 1490. Cowboy Zhu Shimin brought his flower fairy wife back to the crowd, and the impatient children started playing hide-and-seek. Now, only the father and daughter pair of Poplar Fruit and Kiki were left waiting. Kiki was a little anxious. She stood straight and her body swayed a little, but soon, she calmed down, because her father's big hands gently pressed on her two small arms. Although the sun was gently shining, the wind was still a little cold. Her father's big hands wrapped around Kiki's small arms, which were exposed to the air, and immediately isolated the cold air. The little girl's jade skin also became warm. Finally, the door opened again. Kiki and Poplar Fruit both raised their heads and looked over, full of anticipation. In their field of vision, it was as if a ray of bright sunlight poured in. Fong Beibei walked over gracefully. Although the egg-yellow dress that covered her knees was a little out of Poplar Fruit's expectations, he had thought that Fong Beibei would wear a wedding dress. It instantly pulled Poplar Fruit into a distant memory. The girl in front of him was wearing white high-heeled sandals, and her jade feet were as moving as pearls. Above her slender ankles, she was wearing a pure egg-yellow dress. The hem of the dress fluttered slightly, as if it brought with it the fragrance of the summer lotus pond. The girl's pretty face was slightly red. Amidst the cheers of the crowd, under the gaze of the person she loved, she was a little shy. She gently nodded her head, and the white wide-brimmed sun hat covered the red clouds. Ma. Kiki ran up happily and hugged Fong Beibei while giggling. Poplar Fruit was still in the same place, looking at them with a smile. He was actually a little lost in thought. Fong Beibei's outfit was out of his expectations, and it also made him instantly recall the scene when they first met. At that time, wasn't Fong Beibei dressed like this? Blocking out the surrounding noise, Poplar Fruit seemed to have returned to the lakeside. He looked affectionately at the girl in front of him, who seemed to have become the most beautiful scenery in midsummer. Then, as if she sensed something, she looked up and responded with a smile that was brighter than the sun. This smile was in no way inferior to the one Fang Beibei had given him back then. Of course, there was no surprise like before. After living together for many years, the two had become the most familiar with each other. However, Poplar Fruit could not help but feel the rush of excitement from back then. Yes, at that time, there was already a faint feeling of love growing in the bottom of his heart, but at that time, he was still in the period of a blank window, and had not even walked out of the sadness of being heartbroken, so he ignored a lot of feelings that he should have understood. But now, he found it again. Back then, he was indeed moved. This feeling was exactly the same as what he was thinking right now. I want to marry this woman. Amazing, right? Yes, at that time, the idea in his mind was to marry no one else but her. Or to put it another way, he fell in love with Fong Beibei at first sight. This feeling was very mysterious. It was as if he recognized this woman as his other half from the first time he met her. No wonder, No wonder Poplar Fruit had a kind of uncontrollable joy when he met Fong Beibei again at the stray dog rescue station after half a year. No wonder he was so nervous when Fong Beibei visited her for the first time. No wonder he was jealous when he saw Fong Beibei being confessed to, which led to him rushing to confess. Of course, there were some changes in his feelings now. Fong Beibei was already his wife. That kind of ignorant heartbeat had become a kind of calm heartbeat. The woman I fell in love with is so beautiful. Poplar Fruit wanted to do a lot of things at the moment, but all of them were to go up to her, give her the flowers in his hand, and thank her for accompanying him along the way. So, Poplar Fruit gradually returned to reality from his memories. The past merged with the present. The fathers next to him urged him, "Poplar Fruit, go quickly. What are you waiting for?" Poplar Fruit suddenly smiled brightly. He strode forward, and his steps were very steady. Fong Beibei, who had just bent down to hug Kiki, also straightened her back at the right time. Kiki was very obedient and turned sideways to make room for her father. In the end, his child was sensible. She was not like Da Jun and Xian Xian, who intentionally or unintentionally dominated their mother and made their father a joke. At that moment, Kiki was temporarily ignored by Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit came in front of Fong Beibei, lowered his head, and looked into her eyes. His eyes reflected her smiling eyes, and from their gazes, she could feel the strong love. It seemed that the hat was a little blocking their view. Because Poplar Fruit was tall, Fong Beibei needed to raise her head high to see Poplar Fruit's face over the brim of the hat. She was about to push the hat behind her back. "You don't have to take off the hat," Poplar Fruit said gently. He put the flower on Fong Beibei's hat, and used the white silk ornament to clip it. Looking at it this way, the fiery red rose and the pure white hat added a touch of charm to the beauty of the beauty. After he was done, Fong Beibei's face blushed even more. Poplar Fruit's big hand pulled her into his embrace. "Kiss, kiss." The audience around them were not satisfied, and they shouted. Poplar Fruit turned to look at them, and then lowered his head to look at Fong Beibei, who was happily leaning in his arms. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Although the two of them were not the kind of people who liked to show their affection in public, Fong Beibei was not too shy. She had already stood up straight, ready to receive Poplar Fruit's hot kiss. However, Poplar Fruit suddenly used strength in his hands, and Fong Beibei exclaimed softly as Poplar Fruit picked her up. It was not a princess carry, but the kind where his arms were around her knees. He directly used his great strength to lift Fong Beibei vertically and held her to his chest. All of a sudden, Fong Beibei seemed to be sitting on an elevator, and her knees were pressed against Poplar Fruit's chest. At this moment, she seemed to be half a head taller than Poplar Fruit. She did not react in time and quickly hugged Poplar Fruit's neck with both hands. "Oh, oh." The fathers beside them were very cooperative and shouted, "What's going on?" Of course, it was a last-minute idea that Poplar Fruit came up with. Although he didn't say any sweet nothings, his actions showed the gentleness of a man. At this moment, he was slightly domineering for once. He let Fang Beibei get on the lift and lifted her up high like a child. Although they did not communicate beforehand, Fong Beibei seemed to tacitly understand Poplar Fruit's intention of carrying her. Fong Beibei smiled faintly and sweetly, and her slender hand tucked some naughty hair behind her ear. Then, she lowered her beautiful face and kissed Poplar Fruit's lips. In the past, Poplar Fruit was the one who took the initiative. This time, Poplar Fruit let Fong Beibei switch to the upper position. The unexpected kissing posture added a lot of love and interest. Chapter 1491. No wonder Poplar Fruit said that there was no need to take off the hat. Now, Fong Beibei lowered her head while Poplar Fruit raised his head to kiss. From top to bottom, the wide-brimmed sun hat was naturally not an obstacle. But it was hard on the cameraman. The two cameramen circled around the two of them and almost could not find a suitable camera position because of the hat. Under the rotating camera position, this shot was as beautiful as a painting. Fong Beibei was carried high up in Poplar Fruit's arms. Her eyes were filled with happiness. When the female viewers in front of their televisions saw Fang Beibei being picked up, their eyes sparkled like stars. They were about to flood the place. I also want to have such a handsome and strong boyfriend. I also want to be held high by him. I also want to be a woman on top. What the hell? It seemed like the female netizen's breakdown was getting worse and worse. Back at the recording studio, Fong Beibei's arms were originally wrapped around Poplar Fruit's neck because she was a little scared when she was carried. But hugging his neck was a little unnatural. Fong Beibei kissed and slowly found a suitable position. Both of her hands were cupping Poplar Fruit's face. One of her fingers was inserted into Poplar Fruit's hair while the other hand was gently caressing Poplar Fruit's handsome face. So romantic. Anna laughed at Liu Yi. She was a Frenchwoman, so she understood Fang Beibei's almost unconscious actions very well. Weren't some of the romantic actions that Frenchmen used to express their love in French literature films all very intimate? Not only was the action romantic, this kiss was also like a romantic French kiss. It was as if Fong Beibei's attachment to Poplar Fruit and Poplar Fruit's love for Fong Beibei were poured into it. Although it did not reach the level of sticking out their tongues, the two of them kissed for almost a minute. If they were not being watched and there were so many children there, the two of them might have kissed until the end of time. Fong Beibei took the initiative to use one hand to support Poplar Fruit's shoulder blade and raised her head. Her cheeks were rosy, like apples that had ripened in autumn. Perhaps it was because she was shy, or perhaps it was because she was a little breathless from the kiss, but she pursed her lips and smiled. "Baby, you're so beautiful today," Poplar Fruit said affectionately. His voice was not loud and the audience could hear it because of the microphone. However, it did not give the surrounding fathers a chance to jeer. "I love you. I love you too." Fong Beibei was a little infatuated with Poplar Fruit's handsome face and replied sweetly. The audience was also drunk. Some of them were intoxicated by these two sweet words, while some of them were sad and drunk because they were single and had received a critical hit. "I love you guys too." Kiki, who was left out at the side, could not help but steal the limelight. The little girl jumped up and down happily, temporarily forgetting her ladylike demeanor as a princess. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei were pulled back from their two-person world by Kiki. The two of them looked at each other and smiled, but did not continue to linger. Fong Beibei was gently put down by Poplar Fruit. She bent down, hugged Kiki in her arms, and then gently kissed Kiki's face. Coincidentally, Poplar Fruit also very tacitly came over from the other side and kissed Kiki's tender face from both sides. At this moment, the romantic atmosphere became warm. This is the taste of home. Isn't this the change from love to family? Amidst everyone's applause, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei completed their family's first performance. The little rascal could finally happily return to her group of friends. Next, it was time for the dance. The orchestra in the small pavilion began their performance again. Everyone happily danced. Poplar Fruit held Fong Beibei's hand. Liu Yi and Anna, Zhu Shimin and Ran Yingying, Lin Yongjian and Zhu Dongqi were all couples. But Hu Jun's family was more fun. Hu Jun and his daughter danced, while Lu Fang bent down and held Kang Kang's hand. It was quite interesting. When it came to dancing, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei did not dance as well as the other couples. Liu Yi and Anna had a great tacit understanding. The two of them could perform a little of any dance, as if they had practiced together for decades. Because of Zhu Shimin and Ran Yingying's height problem, Zhu Shimin was not even as tall as his wife, who wore high heels, so it was somewhat awkward. But when they changed into an impromptu tango dance, their performance was very eye-catching. In comparison, Lin Yongjian and Zhu Dongqi lacked novelty. They danced a very classical ballroom dance. The audience, who liked this kind of grand and elegant dance, were very happy. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei also tried their best to dance. But they were, after all, students. In the ivory tower, they had almost never come into contact with dancing situations. Those small student dances did not even count. Although Fong Beibei was a multi-talented cadre in the student council, her talents were in singing and playing the guitar. As for dancing, she had only learned a little when she was young. She had long forgotten it. Poplar Fruit did not need to be mentioned. This fellow did not have any artistic talent at all. The only dance he knew was the Tai Chi dance that he had secretly learned from Chen Anlan, as well as the Thomas twist of the street dance. He could dance very well just by relying on his arm and waist strength, but these were not suitable for this occasion. Then what should he do? Poplar Fruit had an idea. He withdrew his hands and gently swayed them in front of his body. Then, he twisted his tall body and moved back and forth. It was a bit like cha-cha. Poplar Fruit had only seen this kind of dance on TV. He did not know what it was called, but it was more commonly seen in American balls. Fong Beibei looked at Poplar Fruit with a smile. She and Poplar Fruit did not need to speak. They understood each other's meaning with their eyes. She also imitated Poplar Fruit's posture. She followed Poplar Fruit's movements and twisted her light body and stepped back and forth. The single audience members who had fainted from sadness slowly woke up. They looked at the screen and angrily cursed, "Fuck, fancy PDA, is there any justice in this world?" Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei were seen moving back and forth in tacit understanding. The seemingly simple dance steps were very pleasing to the eye. It was not the dance steps that were pleasing to the eye. It was because the two of them did not need to lower their heads to look. When one of their feet stepped back, the other's feet stepped forward at the same time. Back and forth, it was like the gears in a fine industrial production line. Although the sizes were different, the operation was surprisingly compatible. Their gently twisting postures and smiling eyes gazing at each other, it was like a pair of butterflies flapping their beautiful wings in spring. Their tacit understanding was amazing. Of course, the camera would not always be on Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei. The little guys next to them were playing together. They were even learning to dance like the adults. That would be a new and interesting sight. Chapter 1492. As soon as the music started to play, the children were already having a great time playing together. First, Da Jun was rolling around on the grass. Then, Nuo Yi and Xian were hugging each other. Only Kiki was holding Nina's hand. My daughter and Nina, who had been very close on the previous 2 trips, were standing on one side like 2 young white poplars that had just sprouted. However, when the music started, my daughter and Nina couldn't help but join in the fun. Girls can't be kept at home when they're of age. While the netizens were sighing, there were also those who were walking away who didn't understand. But they weren't talking about Kiki. After dancing with his mother for a while, Kang went back to his friends. As soon as he turned around, he saw Nina, who was standing quietly on the side, grinning without saying anything. Kiki, who was standing next to Nina, was ignored. Well, it couldn't be helped. After all, Kang had said before that he liked quiet girls. Nina and Kiki were also dancing to the music. However, Kiki was more lively and tried to imitate the actions of adults. Nina was more restrained, but she was still waving her little hands. She looked a little clumsy, but she was still very cute. Kang walked over and held out his hand. "Nina, let's play together, okay?" Kiki hadn't noticed yet. Nina smiled happily and put her hand in brother Kang's hand. Like a young couple, the two of them walked hand in hand on the side of the road. Of course, it wasn't just a walk. Kang seemed to have a natural affinity with Nina. Every time he did something that wasn't too exaggerated, such as when he raised his back leg and supported himself on one leg, Nina would smile happily and even clap her hands. When Kiki turned around, brother Kang had already walked away with his friends. She was a little confused, but Nuo Yi quickly ran over to fill the void beside her. "Kiki, let's dance," Nuo Yi said with a smile. He seemed to have had enough fun with Xian and wanted to change partners. Xian wasn't left alone either. Da Jun rolled around on the ground with him as if they were wrestling, laughing foolishly and cheerfully. The only one who didn't have his own dance partner was Hao Hao. Hao Hao was too young. He couldn't integrate into the world of big brothers and sisters, but he was quickly carried over by his parents. "Okay, hehe, but I'm wearing a skirt now, so it's not convenient for me to dance." Kiki happily agreed, but immediately realized the problem. Why wasn't she active before? Wasn't it because she was restrained by her clothes? Wearing such a beautiful princess dress that was as white as a lotus, the layers of lace were like blooming petals. How could Kiki bear to roll around on the ground in this dress like Da Jun and Nuo Yi? Kiki would feel distressed for half a day even if it left a shallow mark on the grass, let alone being stained with sand. Then what should we do? Nwoyi scratched his head anxiously as if this was a big deal, but he pushed the question back. What are you afraid of? Wash it if it's dirty. It's not like there's no washing machine. Da Jun and Xian just happened to roll nearby. Da Jun heard it and said indifferently, his tone was like a little adult. Xian and Da Jun made the biggest noise. The two of them actually planned to dance properly from the beginning. Da Jun even deliberately imitated his father's movements. His right hand hugged Xian's waist, and his left hand pulled Xian's chubby little hand and shook it. The posture of a social dance was quite decent. However, Xian seemed to have misunderstood. Xian suddenly gave Da Jun a hug and the two of them rolled on the ground. Aya, Xian, it's not like that. Ha ha. Da Jun first complained, but he didn't know why he couldn't stop laughing. Therefore, their ballroom dance turned into a wrestling dance, which was quite fun. Anyway, as long as you're happy. Da Jun's nonchalant words caused Chichi to hesitate a little. On one hand, the little girl cherished the things she liked. On the other hand, it seemed that what Da Jun said was quite right. If the clothes were dirty, couldn't they be washed clean? At this moment, the rhythm of the music suddenly changed a little. It changed from a melodious classical dance music to a lively jazz music. In the green grass field, the joyous atmosphere of people singing and dancing became more and more intense. Aya, it's better not to be confused. Kiki thought it through and took the initiative to pull Nuoyi's hand. She smiled and ran to the center of the field. Seeing the little girl holding the boy's hand with a thin white glove, the audience suddenly had the illusion that the princess was holding the gray boy's hand and walking to the center of the crowd to dance. Yes, everyone didn't see wrongly. The plot seemed to be reversed. Kiki was the real princess, and the mixed-blood handsome Nuoyi had become the gray boy like Cinderella. Seeing them smiling so happily and brightly, it was as if the brilliance of the entire field had gathered on them. There was a kind of amazing beauty that made people gasp in amazement. Cinderella should be happily together with the handsome prince, and as for the gray boy, it seemed like he should also be together with the beautiful princess. After this, the audience's calls for Kiki and Nuoyi to be a couple in variety shows became louder and louder. There were even people who urged Liu Yi to quickly cancel his son's marriage. Nuoyi and Poplar Fruit's daughter should be a couple. Of course, regarding this unreliable argument, Poplar Fruit and Mohan rejected it. Maybe it was because she was inspired by her father and mother, but Kiki also learned from them and danced the cha with Nuoyi. I feel that this is too fun. I. In his happiness, Nuoyi began to nag again. In the past, my mother and I were in France. Of course, the little boy's nag was a little different from Tripitaka's. He was a little bold and imaginative as he talked about his own experiences or his own wild imaginations. He was not just repeating nonsense, but it made the audience unable to hold back their laughter. Aya, brother Nuoyi, you're too fast again. Kiki chuckled as she complained. Her skirt had a few footprints on it. Luckily, the little girl had already let go of her obsession. It seemed like the tacit understanding between the two little fellows was not on the same level as Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei. Although they were having fun, they would occasionally step on each other's feet, trouser legs, or skirt. There was no way to ignore it. Even if their tacit understanding was high, Kiki's rhythm would be disrupted by Nuoyi's strange coordination with his hands and feet. However, they did not care as they danced and twisted their bodies. Gradually, Dajuan and Xian also joined in. Then, they called Kangkang and Nina over. Zhu Shimin also pushed Hao over. The atmosphere was getting better and better. The little fellows were having more fun than the adult. Chapter 1493. What do you think love is? After the grand reception ceremony and the joyous dance, the recording of the show did not end. Just like many domestic TV dramas and variety shows, Daddy doesn't want the show to end in a sea of laughter. It doesn't seem to be the style of the show if we don't end with a sensational ending. After changing their clothes, The children were first brought to the grass by the village chief and asked the philosophical question one-on-one. The children's answers to this question were different, or rather, they all had their own understanding of love. Kang Kang even sighed and said in an adult tone, "Don't ask such a difficult question. I can't answer it, I know it in my heart." However, it seemed that every child's answer was the same. Love is being together, love is being together with Daddy, happiness is being together with all the children. Daddy being with me is love. Chichi's answer was rather mature. That was because she had memorized the words that Fang Beibei and Yang Guo had said back then. Moreover, she had engraved them in her heart. The little girl sat on the green grass with her hands hugging her knees. Her long black hair spread out like a waterfall, her beautiful face seemed to be very sincere, and her eyes were very serious as she said, "Love and like are different. Like is like, love is love." The little girl's voice was very soft and pleasant, as if a cute skylark had flown to the southern hemisphere of Oceania. Like is that you think something is good. For example, I like Barbie dolls, I like to eat Daddy's dishes. In comparison, Kiki's description was much cuter. Some viewers who didn't pay attention to the content would even laugh and say that they liked to see my daughter, who was not even half an adult, talk nonsense in a serious manner. But Kiki was actually very right. But love is different. The little girl raised her arms high as if to show that love was much higher than like. Love is a lot of likes, 100 million likes. Mama said, because love is when you like so much, and then you want to be together forever and never separate. Kiki spoke clearly as if she was reciting a book. She didn't deliberately imitate the tone of an adult like Kang Kang, but what she said were things that adults might not necessarily understand. Although Kiki's speech was a little long, she summed it up like the rest of her friends. Love means being together, love means never being apart. Or, to put it more narrowly, the definition of love in this show was to be together with one's parents, with one's family. After asking the questions, Zhong Tai's parents also changed their clothes. They sat around the U-shaped dining table in the dining room of the cabin and had a simple lunch. However, after eating, no one left their seats. Some staff members removed the plates and moved an LCD screen in front of them. On the eve of the farewell, the real emotional moment began. The village chief was the one who was still wearing his formal suit, he hadn't changed out of it just now. He pointed at the LCD screen and said, "On this journey, we have too many touching stories. Today, we chose a Xiao Duan for everyone to reminisce." Just as the subtitles of the video said, this summer, for fathers and children, was a sudden big adventure. It was also a growing journey of love and searching. The video started with the introduction of the 5 fathers at the beginning of the show's recording. Then, it mixed and edited with bits and pieces of the first 7 journeys. Among them, there were many scenes that made everyone laugh uncontrollably. There were also many scenes that made people feel uncomfortable, embarrassed, and even regretful. Slowly, the memories of the fathers and children were evoked in the audience. At the beginning, everyone was still laughing happily, but slowly, everyone present had tears in their eyes. Even the mothers, who had shallow tear ducts, had to use tissues to wipe their tears. They were laughing because the memories were indeed full of laughter. They were crying because they were a little worried now, worried that the show's recording would end. They were worried that after it ended, there would be no chance for them to reunite, or even if there was a chance, this laughter could only be picked up occasionally. Every child and their father had a separate clip. For example, Lin Yongjian and Da Jun were placed first. The production team wasn't afraid of reopening some scars of the past, but the more they looked at the past, the more they could see Da Jun's growth in the past 5 months. Da Jun, who was unreliable, often cheated his father, and often threw tantrums, had now grown a lot. At least now, he was only slightly unreliable, occasionally cheated his father, and no longer threw tantrums. Not long after, it was Kiki's turn. Actually, Poplar Fruit felt that his daughter hadn't changed much in the past 5 months. But she didn't. From the very beginning of the Secret Rooms test, Yang Guo had the urge to tear up. The change was still very big. Or rather, putting aside the psychological aspect, among the 5 children, Kiki had changed the most. Back then, she was still a skinny little girl. Now, She was already a little beauty loved by all the viewers in the country. Not only had she grown taller and prettier, Kiki's personality had also changed. Back when they first started recording the show, the little girl was very clingy, just like when she was young, just like Beckham's little Seven. When they went out, she would let her father carry her, and she usually liked to stay with her father. There was even one point that left a deep impression on Poplar Fruit. At that time, Kiki still wanted to sleep with her parents every night. In the video, Poplar Fruit once said worriedly in an interview, "Kiki has been with me since she was born. Unless Bebe helps to take care of her, I will bring her with me even when I go on business trips or hold press conferences. I'm really worried that when I'm not by her side, she will cry non-stop. Thinking of this, I feel very sad." However, it could be seen that in the past 5 months, Kiki had become much more independent. Not only did she no longer need her father to carry her, but she also didn't pester her father to play with her all the time. It was as if she was slowly learning how to socialize, and she enjoyed every bit of happiness from playing with her friends. In the show, she could even accept that her father wasn't by her side temporarily. For example, during the 2nd trip to Minute Province and the 5th trip to Shijiang, Kiki had to sleep with her friends at night, or even sleep alone, but she bravely persevered. At home, Kiki could already live in her own little house, and she could sleep alone at night. Of course, she still wanted her father to tell her stories, and she could only listen to her father's voice when she fell asleep. But these were all improvements. Chapter 1494. When the scene moved forward at a brisk pace, the scenes flashed one after another. Poplar Fruit could no longer hold back the tears in his eyes. Kiki was the only protagonist left on the screen. Poplar Fruit temporarily withdrew from this small stage. First, during the 2nd journey, when they parted in front of the earthen building, Kiki finally could not help but cry. It was like lightning that pierced through everyone's heart. "Papa, I don't want you to leave." The little girl, who had been strong for so long, cried in her father's arms at this time. Poplar Fruit's reaction was the same as before. His eyes turned red all of a sudden. Kiki was strong during the mission. While muttering, "I have to perform well so that Papa can come back," she tried her best to take care of herself and her friends. Then, she completed one mission after another. The scene came to the 5th journey. Poplar Fruit was absent because of his injury. After the military training, the little girl, whose bangs were wet with sweat, sat at the dining table to eat. However, she inexplicably grabbed her food and cried. Her tears were as big as beans and fell into her food. Her friends came over to comfort her. Kiki said the reason, "I miss my papa. He's injured. I'm very worried about him." The camera panned to Poplar Fruit, who was sitting next to his daughter. Poplar Fruit could no longer hold back his emotions. While smiling, he wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes with his hand. Poplar Fruit noticed that the 4th journey in the clouds had been skipped by the program team intentionally or unintentionally. Although that was more emotional, they did not want to reveal the bad memory that no one wanted to recall. The video moved forward very quickly. Soon, it came to the 6th journey of Poplar Fruit's return. In the Hong village in the South Lake, there was a small behind-the-scenes scene. Poplar Fruit's wound was pulled because of a fierce competition. It was not bleeding, but it was very painful. He needed to sit aside and rest while grimacing. Kiki, who was originally playing happily on the swing with her friends, saw this and walked over in confusion. After asking about it, she accompanied her father with a worried expression and was unwilling to leave. What touched Poplar Fruit and the parents the most was how Kiki used her little hands to rub her father's wound. Before everyone's emotions could brew, the scene flashed, and they returned to their previous journey. The background was the gloomy prison. In the flickering candlelight, Kiki, who was dressed in civilian clothes, said to her father in the prison, "Papa, don't be afraid. I will definitely get you out of here." Haha tilde the restaurant was filled with laughter. Kiki's overly serious expression had indeed struck a chord with everyone. However, the reunion after a long separation was more touching. The video seemed to be moving backward in time. It started from the 7th journey and showed the happy smiling faces of the little girl who had completed the task and returned to find her father. Of course, what touched everyone the most was the second trip. During the night in the earthen building, Chichi bravely went to sleep alone, and when her father returned, she leaped out of her blanket with elation and wrapped her arms tightly around her father's neck. Seeing Kiki's strong attachment and deep joy, everyone could not help but smile, because this feeling of happiness caught everyone's heart without any hindrance. Yanghua smiled as tears flowed down her cheeks. These weren't tears of sadness, but of happiness. This memory was actually very clear. However, after watching the video, Poplar Fruit recalled it again. At that time, the feeling of being hugged tightly by the sleeping little girl was really good. Only when losing could one understand the importance of having. This was not only for Kiki, but also for Poplar Fruit. Kiki's video ended in a warm atmosphere. This video was not the same as the other children's videos, because the other children's videos were only a review of their progress from the past to the present. Perhaps this was also the deeper meaning of the program team. Because Chichi had slowly improved from a clingy father, childish, and a little delicate little girl, she had grown into a true little princess who was responsible, united with her companions, and sensible. However, Kiki also had her own persistence, and that was her love for her father, which would never fade. Even if they looked from the back to the front, everyone still had to applaud Kiki. After watching the video, her father had to give a speech. Poplar Fruit was not afraid. He wiped away his tears with a smile, stood up, and said generously, "Many friends on the internet say that I am very lucky." His voice was a little hoarse because he was moved. "I also think that I am very lucky, really lucky." Poplar Fruit smiled, lowered his head, and looked at Fong Beibei. He patted his daughter's little head and said, "With such an obedient and sensible daughter, you have also met the love of your life." When I saw Kiki's birth in the hospital, I felt like the sky was falling down, because I had just graduated for less than a year, and I suddenly had a daughter. Poplar Fruit said as if he was reminiscing. Taking care of a child is a very difficult thing, and taking care of a child alone is even more difficult. Poplar Fruit said, "But what everyone doesn't know is that Kiki has been very obedient and sensible since she was a child. She doesn't cry or be naughty. Compared to other parents, I am very lucky." Poplar Fruit repeated the word lucky many times. It was not a slip of the tongue or that he was incoherent because he was moved, but it was important to say it 3 times. "Then I met Beibei." Poplar Fruit lowered his head and kissed Fong Beibei's forehead. The latter hugged Kiki shyly and said, "The 2 luckiest things in my life are that I can be with Beibei. Not only has she helped and supported me a lot in life, but the most important thing is that I love her, she loves me, and she also loves Kiki." Poplar Fruit said. Suddenly, Kiki raised her head and helped her father to add, "I also love Mama. Yes, because we both love each other. So, we are very happy, Poplar Fruit said. Poplar Fruit continued, "It is really a pleasure to participate in this show. Kiki and I have met so many super good friends, and we have gone on adventures together, leaving so many wonderful memories together. But I think that there is actually a very precious harvest. It is through these 8 trips that we have learned to express love." Poplar Fruit's words made everyone nod. Our Chinese families are actually more reserved. Love is in the heart and can't be said out loud, Poplar Fruit said, but this is not a good tradition. We should express it boldly, so that there will be fewer obstacles to happiness. So, I suggest that we all, the audience in front of the TV, Poplar Fruit was a little bit of a teacher's occupational disease, but he said it very well. Everyone looked at him seriously and said, "Give the people you love a hug. Children, hug your parents and tell them, 'Daddy, Mommy, I love you.' Mommy and Daddy also hug the children and tell the children, 'Baby, I love you.'" Poplar Fruit looked at Zhu Shimin and the others, who had already taken action in front of him, and said with a smile, "I believe that when you express your love, you will also receive the love of your family. I hope that all of our families can be happy and perfect." Chapter 1495. After the video ended, the fathers finished their speeches. It seemed that it was really time to say goodbye. The atmosphere was a little solemn, because no one wanted to say goodbye. Even some of the children, fathers, and mothers still had red eyes. They didn't know whether they were still immersed in the previous emotions or sad because of the upcoming parting. Thank you. The village chief wanted to say something, but as soon as he opened his mouth, his voice broke. It was because he had watched the video just now and recalled every detail that he had participated in. When he thought of the 5 cute faces, his eyes were filled with tears. It was inevitable that his voice would break because he wasn't prepared. The fathers laughed kindly, but because of the village chief's unexpected mistake, the sad atmosphere finally became a little more cheerful. The village chief shook his head with a smile and started again. I really hope that we will never say goodbye. Although our trip is coming to an end, each of our children's loveliness, kindness, innocence, stubbornness, tenacity, and courage have been deeply imprinted in each of our heart. 8 trips, 8 different experiences. I'm very happy to see the growth of the babies and the growth of each of our fathers. The village chief continued, but this is really our last trip in the 3rd season of Where Are We Going, Dad? Everyone stopped smiling and looked at the village chief. Kiki was still nervously holding her father's hand. She was so sad that she was about to cry. In the end, the village head said, but we should end this pleasant journey in a particularly happy way, okay? They stopped here for a moment because the village chief wanted to tell everyone what to say next, but Chichi squeezed her head into her father's arms. I don't want to. The little girl sniffed in her father's arms. Her voice was muffled, and only Poplar Fruit could hear it. I know you can't bear to part with so many good friends. You feel sad. Poplar Fruit hugged his daughter and patted her thin back gently with his big hand. It's okay. If you feel sad, cry it out. He didn't care whether Kiki wanted to participate in the particularly happy ending ceremony at the end. How could he let a 4-year-old child control her emotions so well? Besides, Kiki was a very emotional child. However, Daddy also hopes that you can understand. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, we're just saying goodbye to your friends like before and going back to our own homes. Although there won't be any more shows in the future, we can still get together and have fun. Yes. We will have frequent gatherings in the future. Zhu Shimin smiled, and the other fathers all agreed. Da Jun stood on the bench, but he leaned over with his hands on the table. He didn't seem to be too sad about separation. Instead, he asked loudly, Kiki, why are you crying? Because she's afraid that she won't be able to play with you in the future. Poplar Fruit answered on behalf of his daughter. Aya, what's there to cry about? Da Jun said optimistically, now that transportation is so developed, we can still meet often. Perhaps this was what Lin Yongjian and the others used to comfort Da Jun. Da Jun continued, Kiki, don't cry. If you come to Beijing to play, won't you be able to find me, Nuo Yi, and brother Kang Kang? I'll also go to Yangcheng to play with you. Your father's barbecue is super delicious. Yes, yes. Xian and the others nodded vigorously. It seemed that the best memory that Yangcheng gave the children was Poplar Fruit's super delicious barbecue. Because it was a little out of context, this scene wasn't shown on TV. Otherwise, the audience would definitely be laughed to death by these grown-up yet childish children. However, Da Jun's comforting words seemed to be more effective than Poplar Fruit's promise. Kiki turned around and smiled through her tears. After wiping away the tears on the little cat's face, everyone got into their positions and prepared to record the last scene. The village chief waved his hand and said, Friends, let us continue to be happy. The camera turned to the 5 families, and everyone's face was full of smiles. Some raised their arms and cheered, while others waved their small hands and said in unison, Happy every journey. Amidst a round of applause, the recording of Where Are We Going, Daddy, finally ended. Everyone left their seats and hugged and said goodbye to their friends who had gone through 8 journeys with them. Kiki even went to the village chief, the assistant director sister, and the cameraman uncle to hug and say goodbye to them. Village chief, will we be able to meet again in the future? Chichi also seemed to understand that unlike the other children, the production team's village chief, the cameraman, and the others would have very few chances to meet in the future. It was just like how they had filmed a show with the other children in the past. In the next season, there would be new children starting a new journey. Yes, yes. Good girl. The village chief comforted Kiki. He really liked this smart and sensible girl. He smiled and said, Didn't you already remember the village chief's phone number? If you miss the village chief in the future, just give him a call. I will call the village chief. Kiki nodded obediently. Even if she didn't want to leave, there was no other way. In the end, they still had to leave. Other than Poplar Fruit's family who continued to stay in Australia to enjoy their holiday, the others, including Zhu Ximin and the rest, had to return to China. After all, the big stars were very busy with their work. They had a lot of movie and TV series commitments. Zhu Ximin was also busy with some of his transition work. Only Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei, one had applied for leave, while the other was still a student, so they had more time. Therefore, that night, Poplar Fruit and the rest sent off the rest of the team, while they planned to play in Western Australia for 2 more days. Originally, they wanted to go to Sydney, Canberra, and other big cities in the east to take a look, but time didn't allow it. They had no choice, because Poplar Fruit told Fong Beibei that he suddenly had to return to China for a meeting on Friday. If they went to the east, the rest of the time could only be wasted on the road. Fong Beibei was very considerate. Not only was she not angry about Poplar Fruit's sudden change of plans, she was worried that it would delay his business, so she asked Poplar Fruit if he wanted to go home early. But how could Poplar Fruit let her suffer? Since he couldn't have a good time, he might as well seize every minute and second to enjoy his 2-day vacation. However, plans could never keep up with changes. On the afternoon of the first day, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei stayed in the hospital, experiencing the difficulties of seeing a doctor and the long queues in Western country. The problem wasn't Kiki, but Fong Beibei. Originally, Fong Beibei had already recovered, and no problems were found during the recording. However, who would have thought that when the family of 3 had a picnic in Perth's most famous Wildflower King Park, Fong Beibei would vomit again because of nausea. This made Poplar Fruit nervous. Although it didn't seem serious, it was the second time Fong Beibei had such a situation since they arrived in Australia, and this time, they didn't eat any seafood like lobsters. Poplar Fruit, who was worried about his wife's health, didn't care that they were unfamiliar with the place, and insisted on bringing Fong Beibei to Perth's Freeman Hospital for a checkup, hoping that there wouldn't be any major problem. Chapter 1496. It was October in Yangcheng, and the temperature was still as warm as summer. The girls on the streets were dressed fashionably, and they wore shorts, miniskirts, and high heels. Their long, white legs were the 9th most beautiful sight in Yangcheng. However, such a beautiful scenery was not located in the university town or the old campus of other universities as people imagined. After all, there were many young and beautiful female university students there. Of course, there were also many of the former, but unfortunately, the female students were still a little shy. Relatively speaking, the place with the densest and most spectacular scenery was the central business district of Yangcheng. It was also the place that everyone used to call Zhujiang New City. There were countless skyscrapers there, and countless first-class Chinese and even international companies and enterprises were stationed there. There were also countless well-paid female white-collar workers who knew how to live a good life. Naturally, they were the main force that led the fashion trend in Yangcheng. However, Poplar Fruit did not have time to care about these beautiful scenery. He hurried out of the parking lot, passed through a small square, and walked into a 40-story building nearby. New Translation Road Publishing House moved out of a slightly remote and old building, which was later sold to Fong Beibei as a stray cat and dog rescue center and pet hospital, and moved into this building. Zheng Yujie had a good eye from the beginning. Taking advantage of the aftermath of the financial crisis, the Chinese housing market had not recovered, and the seller was eager to sell. She bought the 19th to 23rd floors of this building for 90 million. Of course, Zheng Mingsheng was also involved. At such a low price, there were many rich people who were covetously eyeing it. After buying it, the 4-story building rose from 90 million 2 years ago to a scale that could not be bought with 400 million. Not to mention buying it, just renting one floor would cost more than 500,000 a month. When they bought it, the company saved nearly 30 million a year in rent. Putting aside the investment of these fixed assets, after all, there were some political elements involved. Without Zheng Mingsheng, Zheng Yujie might not have been able to make such a big decision. When New Translation Road Publishing House bought it, They eliminated the book printing plant. It was a bit like Apple. Now, they were looking for contract factories all over the world to save a lot of transportation costs. Therefore, those who remained on the fourth floor of the building were the elites of the publishing house. For example, the New Translation Road publishing house not only nurtured its own editorial team but also dug out a large number of top editors at home and abroad. They did not have a fixed grouping but would work in the form of a project. Every time, there would be a different editorial team to review and communicate with the authors and translators. The strongest was the business team led by Zhang Yujie. Half of the team was Chinese, while the other half was hired from overseas. After 1 to 3 years of working together, they had formed a powerful fighting force that even international publishing giants could not ignore. The most important thing was that they had adapted to the more popular online marketing model. They had used a variety of channels to promote the translations of many online literary works in the country, so that their names could be seen on the bestseller list for the next few years. Just like Harry Potter, Twilight, and so on back then, in the current international literary boom, not only Western fantasy, but Chinese fantasy had also gained a firm foothold. Not to mention other things, because of the eagerness of people around the world, several novels had been bought by Hollywood movie giants in the second half of this year. Although New Translation Road could not profit from it, they saw the new Chinese culture gradually rising on the world stage under their promotion. This feeling of glory filled everyone in New Translation Road with passion for their work. This was the difference that Poplar Fruit felt when he returned to the publishing house this time. Last time, it seemed that because of the aftermath of the company's equity turmoil, everyone except the senior management was a little nervous. Now, everyone's face was full of smiles, and many people took the initiative to greet Poplar Fruit. It was as if this huge cultural aircraft carrier was on the right path. And that was the truth. Yang Guo didn't think too much about it. The development of the publishing house wasn't something he needed to worry about. He didn't have the ability to do so. The main reason he came back this time was because of the national policy support that Zhang Yujie mentioned. He was very useful. Putting aside the previous achievements of the publishing house, Poplar Fruit's name was also well known in the industry. Except for his lack of qualifications and young age, Poplar Fruit's ability could definitely be called the leader of the translation world. His translation of many works had already set a Guinness World Record in sales, and the wealth that he earned and created by himself was naturally unmatched in the translation world. In history, no one could find a translator who could earn more money than him. Of course, Poplar Fruit's main job was a teacher, but his contribution to New Translation Road and even the entire Chinese translation world should not be underestimated. In addition to his translation ability, Poplar Fruit also trained more than a dozen gold medal translators and a large number of silver medal translators with high potential for New Translation Road. And his voice in the reform of the entire translation industry through New Translation Road was no less than Martin Luther King's contribution to the black community, because the reform of income sharing led by New Translation Road was gradually showing result. It couldn't be helped. If the other publishing houses did not do what New Translation Road did, their translators would probably have to go to New Translation Road. It was precisely because of this reason that the literary translation market changed from its previous decline and showed signs of prosperity. Moreover, the market's demand for language talents and high-level translators had increased, which also promoted the development of language education. This was only the tip of the iceberg that everyone could see but had not fully revealed yet. It was believed that in the future, the treatment of language talents would get better and better. And the spread of Chinese culture and the integration of the world's culture would also show a more positive attitude. At the end of the day, it was Poplar Fruit's contribution that pushed this domino effect. For example, the reason for this meeting, the country's decision to support the cultural export industry, wasn't it all because of Poplar Fruit's thesis published in the middle of this year? The entire cultural market, and even the movie and TV drama markets, had been shaken by Poplar Fruit's thesis. How could the country ignore it? In the past, they could only help the spread of Chinese culture through small policy support such as the Confucius Institute. Now that they had the opportunity to change from passive to active, the country naturally had to support the development of the cultural industry. On one hand, they had to go out. On the other hand, They had to add new vitality and blood to the cultural industry through going out to prevent the cultural industry from suffering a greater impact after the end of the WTO protection period at the end of this year. It was time to change from defense to offense. Blindly defending would only result in being beaten up. Poplar Fruit listened to the explanation of the country's department representatives at the meeting and understood the key to it. He admired it from the bottom of his heart, and his fighting spirit surged. However, the problem was not this. The problem was, why did he feel that Zheng Yujie was a little absent-minded in this important meeting? Why did this sister of his seem to be secretly winking at him? Chapter 1497. Such an important matter naturally could not be settled in one meeting. After listening to the spiritual transmission from above, the new translation road would have several meetings in the next few days. Then the senior management would discuss how to use the support of this policy to develop the new translation road better. For them, reaching the standard was no longer a problem. Poplar Fruit still had to come to the meeting later. He was going to chat with Zheng Yujie as usual, then say goodbye and go home. However, after entering Zheng Yujie's office, Zheng Yujie suddenly pounced on him. She was so fast that Poplar Fruit could only hurriedly throw away the folder and other things in his hand before he could hold Zheng Yujie's shoulder. However, the emotions that had long been difficult to suppress had already made Zheng Yujie lose control. Before Poplar Fruit could hold her, she pushed Poplar Fruit down on the sofa, then pressed down on Poplar Fruit's head and kissed him hard. At that time, the soft touch of nearly 4 years was like a small hand imprinted on Poplar Fruit's lips. His pupils shrank instantly, and his mind went blank for nearly 2 seconds. Then, he hurriedly helped Zheng Yujie up. Zheng Yujie would not know that at that moment, Poplar Fruit's body seemed to have traveled to his girlfriend's wedding. However, the surroundings were silent, and the messy tables and chairs were empty. Only he and Zheng Yujie were left. Then, at that time, he was also kissed by force. Zheng Yujie's kiss was a bit like a rose. It was fiery red, passionate, and full of a suffocating fragrance. Poplar Fruit almost lost himself in it. But roses had thorns. After being absent-minded for 2 seconds, Poplar Fruit reacted and hurriedly helped Zheng Yujie up. Yujie. Poplar Fruit stood up angrily and looked at Zheng Yujie, who was still stretching her body on the sofa, and said, What are you doing? Your words, your head is rejecting. Zheng Yujie did not seem to hear Poplar Fruit's words. She smiled softly and said happily, but, your mouth, your heart, and your body are reacting strongly. Zheng Yujie raised her hand and pointed to Poplar Fruit's crotch. Her fingers were painted with red nail polish and her skin was very white. She had always done a good job of taking care of her body. Poplar Fruit turned his body in embarrassment. He frowned and said, Are you testing me? Although he was a little distracted by Zheng Yujie's surprise, Poplar Fruit quickly at this time, and his voice sounded a little different. Why would I test you? Zheng Yujie heard Poplar Fruit's dissatisfaction. She was a little flustered. She waved her hand and said with some grievance, You've been avoiding me. I just want to kiss you. Do you hate me? Zheng Yujie had been in Guangdong province for a few years, so she spoke with a Cantonese accent. Poplar Fruit said helplessly, I don't hate you, but we shouldn't be like this. Towards Zheng Yujie, the guilt in his heart made him unable to say anything harsh. Naturally, he could not bear to scold her. Then why are you still avoiding me? Why do you always refuse to see me? Zheng Yujie seemed to not understand Poplar Fruit's words. At this moment, she was like a hurt schoolgirl, and Poplar Fruit was the bad boyfriend. Poplar Fruit was a little crazy. He really wanted to scold her, but he couldn't open his mouth. Scratching his head, Poplar Fruit said with a bitter face, Yujie, stop it, okay? You know, it's impossible between us. I've already registered with Bebe. Poplar Fruit could only repeat the same old story and clarify the relationship with Zheng Yujie. I know. Zheng Yujie nodded and said. She walked over and stared straight at Yang Guo. That pair of phoenix eyes and eyebrows were really beautiful. They were affectionate and had a charm that could captivate one's soul. Poplar Fruit had to continue saying, It's great that you know. I have a good relationship with Fong Bebe, and I won't leave her. I know, I know. Zhang Yujie grabbed Poplar Fruit's hand and didn't let him pull it out. They stood face to face across the table, and Zhang Yujie's eyes were filled with tears. The moment his hand was grabbed, Poplar Fruit felt like he had been electrocuted. But when he saw Zhang Yujie's tears, which was the opposite of what she had just said, his heart was fiercely grasped, and he didn't pull his hand out. I know. I didn't understand before, but now I know. Zhang Yujie's words made Poplar Fruit feel a little confused. I won't ask you to leave her, and I won't break up your family. I'm not that kind of bad person. Zhang Yujie's eyes were filled with tears, and she said with infinite grievance, but I know you have me in your heart. You have me in your heart, and that's enough. What do you mean? Poplar Fruit felt a little confused. That is. Zhang Yujie was a little shy, but she wasn't a shy person. Instead, she opened her eyes wide, looked at Poplar Fruit boldly, and said, I'm willing to only be your lover, and I don't want any title. Ah! Poplar Fruit felt like his head had been hit by a bullet, no, a bomb. He doubted his ears. Did he hear it wrong? How could Zhang Yujie say something like that? Zhang Yujie's face was a little pink. She gritted her teeth and said shyly and angrily, I'll say it. I want to be your lover. She bit out the rest of the sentence word by word. After saying that, Zhang Yujie seemed to have lost all her strength. She nervously grabbed Poplar Fruit's hand and looked into his eyes nervously. Poplar Fruit's mind was in a mess at the moment. It was even more chaotic than when Kiki was kidnapped. His brain couldn't handle two things at the same time. What did she mean by being his lover? What was a lover? Zhang Yujie looked at Poplar Fruit with his mouth wide open. After a while, she couldn't wait any longer. She pushed Poplar Fruit angrily, and her shyness disappeared. Instead, she said angrily, hey, give me some reaction. Even if she was his lover, it wasn't like Weibo where he only followed her for a while. At the very least, there should be a verification like WeChat. Poplar Fruit finally came to his senses. He said with a wry smile, Yujie, don't joke around. What kind of personality did Zhang Yujie have? What kind of family background did she have? How could Poplar Fruit not know? How could she be his lover? But Zhang Yujie was just like that. She pursed her lips and looked straight at him. Even the tears in her eyes couldn't hide her stubbornness. You're not joking? Poplar Fruit panicked. He looked at Zhang Yujie's eyes and panicked. He didn't deceive himself anymore. You're the one who's joking. Zhang Yujie went around the table and pounced on him. She blinked her eyes and tears fell down. Poplar Fruit hurriedly grabbed Zhang Yujie's hand, but he couldn't stop her from falling into his arms. When that warm and soft body was tightly pressed against him, Poplar Fruit suddenly calmed down. Yujie, listen to me. I really didn't want to torture Sister Zheng. You have to believe that Xiao Han is a good person. Chapter 1498. That's right, Fong Beibei was pregnant. Back in Perth, Poplar Fruit had brought Fong Beibei for a checkup and they had queued up for a very long time. In the end, when they arrived, the doctor told them that they had registered for the wrong number. They should have applied for the gynecology department. Poplar Fruit had been a little confused at the time. Fong Beibei didn't understand English and Poplar Fruit had no concept of medicine at all. He thought that the gynecology department could cure nausea, so he could only follow the doctor's instructions and queue up again. After waiting for another hour, Poplar Fruit listened to the gynecologist's explanation and was dumbfounded. He wondered if he had heard wrongly. He even confirmed it with the doctor several times. Then, Poplar Fruit excitedly told Fong Beibei that she was pregnant. No wonder she had vomited. It wasn't the nausea from eating seafood, it was the reaction of pregnancy. Poplar Fruit, you idiot, you big idiot. You've forgotten the plot that has been played out countless times in novels and TV shows. Of course, Poplar Fruit was also confused because he was too concerned. The sudden birth of the little life brought endless joy to Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei. Kiki was also overjoyed. She was finally going to be a big sister. After the ecstasy, Poplar Fruit and the others looked at each other. That's not right. They always wear condoms when they do it. How did she get pregnant? Could it be one of those days? Poplar Fruit whispered into Fong Beibei's ear. After some investigation, it was indeed true. Fong Beibei hadn't been pregnant for too long. It was about 1 or 2 months, which happened to be when Poplar Fruit returned to Yangcheng to recuperate. Although it was said to be recuperation, Poplar Fruit's injuries weren't serious. The injuries to his internal organs had been mostly healed while he was unconscious. After that, he spent a period of time recuperating in the capital and used his internal energy to speed up the healing process. All that was left were a few flesh wounds caused by the gunshot. After all, some of his muscles were torn, burned, and even penetrated. Even with his internal strength, he could only recover a little every day. Even so, his recovery speed was already amazing to the old doctors in the capital. Although Poplar Fruit's external injuries had not completely healed, his body was still in top condition. Moreover, because there were so many people coming to visit them all day long, they received a lot of tonics at home. Fong Beibei, who had learned a lot of secret recipes for making soup from her mother, made ginseng and Ganoderma chicken soup for Poplar Fruit every day. It was so nourishing that Poplar Fruit could not vent his anger. Since his wound had not healed, he could not practice martial art. Coincidentally, Fong Beibei also stayed at home to accompany Poplar Fruit every day. After Kiki went to kindergarten in the morning, the young couple would have sex at home, and they were very happy. At first, Fong Beibei was worried about Poplar Fruit's body. However, after 100 rounds of sex, she was so weak that she had no strength at all, while Poplar Fruit was still full of energy. She was so shy that she was pulled onto the bed by Poplar Fruit again and again. However, because Poplar Fruit was injured, Fong Beibei was the only one who could take the initiative. Poplar Fruit took advantage of the time when she was sweating profusely to persuade her not to use a condom, saying that it felt a little weak. Fong Beibei muddle-headedly agreed. Later, they both thought that it was a safe period and did not take it to heart. In the end, it seemed that it was indeed a misfire during that period of time. "It's all your fault." Fong Beibei pinched Poplar Fruit's waist and said angrily when Kiki wasn't paying attention. "It's all my fault, it's all my fault." Poplar Fruit couldn't stop smiling. He hugged Fong Beibei's head and kissed it again and again. Although it was strange, Fong Beibei and Poplar Fruit were the same. Their hearts were filled with happiness and sweetness. Of course, Fong Beibei was a little nervous. After all, she wasn't completely ready to be a mother. Therefore, on the plane home, Fong Beibei blamed Poplar Fruit many times. She blamed him for being too bad and letting her accept such news without being prepared. She blamed him for encouraging her back then, causing her to probably have to attend her wedding pregnant like Sister and Lan. She also blamed Poplar Fruit for being too barbaric at night. Would his movements be too big and hurt the child? In short, Fong Beibei returned home with a worried mood. Under Poplar Fruit's careful care and Kiki's obedient performance, she gradually accepted this fact. However, this fact had a different feeling for Zheng Yujie. At this juncture, Fong Beibei, with the power of pregnancy, was like Mount Qinling between her and Poplar Fruit. She really didn't know how she should express her feelings about this matter. Hate. Actually, she didn't. After a period of self-relaxation and thinking, since she had already made up her mind to be Poplar Fruit's lover, it meant that she had already let go of the prejudice between her and Fong Beibei because of Poplar Fruit. Because she longed for Poplar Fruit's love, she was willing to no longer care about that piece of paper, and no longer care about the status that was taken by the official choice. She only pitifully pursued the person she loved and pursued the position in her lover's heart, even if it was less than half of her. Zheng Yujie's love had already reached a dead end, but she still wanted to love deeply and vigorously, even if it was just to be a lover that wasn't recognized by the world, or a mistress. Because she only had Poplar Fruit in her eyes, even the world was just a meaningless shadow, so she didn't hate Fong Beibei. Without disputes, how could there be love and hatred? However, Fang Beibei's appearance had crushed the strong will that she had built up with great effort. She knew that she could do anything for love. But how could she let Poplar Fruit do anything for her? Poplar Fruit still had Kiki, who was precious to him, even if he had to give up his life. Poplar Fruit still had his home, in his words, it was a happy and warm home that he didn't want to destroy. Poplar Fruit still had her, the one who walked into his life when he needed her the most, the one who quietly stood behind him, the one who didn't care about glorious achievement. And now, Poplar Fruit had a new him or her. Although it was still in the womb, he would also invest a lot of love and care in that little life. Zheng Yujie couldn't see and couldn't imagine how much love she could get from such a poplar fruit. Of course, even if Feng Beibei wasn't pregnant, perhaps the answer she got today was no. Zheng Yujie looked dazed, but at this moment, she was unbelievably calm. Poplar Fruit looked at her worriedly and called out, Yujie, Yujie, what's wrong? Zheng Yujie finally came back to her senses. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes in a panic, but when she raised her head, she put on a very calm and normal smile, and even a little teasing. Ayo, why can't you take a joke? Zheng Yujie seemed to have returned to her carefree state. She patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder and laughed. I was just joking with you, and you took it seriously? Joking? Poplar Fruit looked at Zheng Yujie in surprise, but Zheng Yujie's expression at this moment told him that she was telling the truth, which made him a little confused. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.